pierwszy, jest pan pierwszy. I 7 minut, tak,
Dobrze. Będę musiał skrócić swoje wystąpienie.
Bo mamy jeszcze Kirna Sanana i mamy jeszcze panią Iwanę z Ukrainy, która jest trzecia.
Bardzo dobrze. No dobra.
7 minut, dobrze?
Okej, dobrze. Dobrze.
Nie. Pani chce, żeby pan tylko chodzi o to, żeby...
You're close by. That's
So I can take Gerard.
Jak to idzie podobał?
Yeah, I think you can take it because we made it a little bit shorter. So she gives the floor to Timo Pesela, and then it's back into your hands to give the floor to Ivana. Then you manage the debate. Then she gives the floor after the debate to Pesela and to Ivana. And then you say, and then you conclude saying thank you.
Czyli pan kontynuuje, pan kończy, tak? Gerard, one second, please. Mr. Żański will go to as a keynote speaker. So he will ask Zalewski, Mr. Zalewski, yes? So it didn't change. So Mr. Żański.
Or I realize
Nic się nie zmieniło w scenariuszu. Na początku taki scenariusz. Oni nic nie zmienili, oni wystali na scenariusz. I oni tutaj nic nie zmienili. Tak. Tak, i później Pawła Zalewskiego, tak, ona ale zaraz bo ona ma problem z czytaniem deklaracji, tak?
it's like the odd couple of the Muppet Show.
And there is a grace. You will give the floor back to the speakers. This is the great part is
Mary, ona była panią Krysanami. Ona była. Tak. I tak jak tutaj jest napisane. Czy jak będzie przerwa, to tam po prostu woła po jej wystąpieniu Zalewskiego.
Po głosu sesji tutaj poprosił również
Kiedy
just need to read the grade.
Jedno zabieram. To jest ja będę tu śledzić, więc gdyby coś, to będziemy pomagać. Ale ona chyba że próbować personela, bo ma problemy z nazwiskami, więc po prostu chodzi o to, żeby to nazwiska pan czytał.
Not this part, huh?
Yes. Of course.
Yes.
So now I'm totally confused by anyway. It's okay. Oh, this is really Yes. Very often. So otherwise you wouldn't see nothing. Really, really great. You need a little, shall I bring you a drink? Did you kiss? I mean, we could start immediately. Anything on the... Yes, and great, great. No, really. I'm totally happy. Yes, because there are sometimes makes a great big difference. Really, really.
Myślę, ten dzwonek można już wyłączyć. Tak, to ten dzwonek? A nie, no to co trzeba? Ten mikrofon jakby, czy co?
This is the artificial one. No, I have to change that.
Może pan zaczynać.
Yes, of course, yeah. I mean, good to know. Yes, but it's really interesting. The German Bundestag, everything is at the same level. And the president is just a little bit.
A mówców mamy w razie czego?
Tam jest pan Zalewski.
Szanowni Państwo, drodzy goście, koleżanki
Ladies and
i
gentlemen,
koledzy,
dear
witam
colleagues,
serdecznie w kolejnym
a
naszym drugim
very
dniu
warm welcome
naszego
to
spotkania
the
w
second
polskim
day of
parlamencie.
our meeting at the Polish
Myślę, że
Parliament.
ten dzień będzie równie owocny jak
I hope that this
wczorajszy.
day is as
Nie
fruitful
chodzi
as
tylko i
yesterday,
wyłącznie o prezentowanie stanowisk, ale
and
przedstawianie
this is
swoich
not just about
wniosków i konkluzji.
presenting the
Moi
positions
drodzy,
and statements, but also
Uścisk
about
dłoni
drawing conclusions.
prezydentów Busha i Gorbaczowa
President
w
Bush and President Gorbachev
1989 roku
shook hands in
zakończył zimną
1989,
wojnę.
thereby ending the Cold War.
Odetchnął z ulgą i mimo
The world
toczących się
breathed
lokalnych
a breath of
konfliktów
relief, and in
perspektywa
spite of
stawała się
local
optymistyczna.
conflicts, prospects
Szczególnie
for
odczuwało
the
się
future
to w mojej
were
ojczyźnie
optimistic, and
i w
this was
krajach,
particularly
które
felt
dołączyły do
in
rodziny
my
krajów
country
demokratycznych
and the other
i
countries
Unii
that
Europejskiej.
joined to the family of democratic countries
Europa,
and the EU.
zafascynowana swoim dalszym
Europe
rozwojem,
was
dyskutowała i
fascinated
podejmowała
by its
kroki
further
związane z
development,
bezpieczeństwem.
and it did
Tu
talk
chciałbym
and undertake certain
przywołać
steps about
powołanie
security.
Europejskiej Agencji
For
Obrony,
example, the European Defence
zainicjowanie oraz
Agency was
formowanie grup bojowych Unii
established,
Europejskiej w 2004
and the
roku,
EU combat
które
groups
miały
were
głównie
established in
reagować na zdarzenia
2004
kryzysowe.
that were supposed to react to crisis
Rok
situations
2014,
most of all.
bezprawna aneksja przez Rosję
2014,
Krymu
with the
i
unlawful
wschodnich
annexation of
regionów
Crimea
Ukrainy,
and
były
eastern parts of
pierwszym
Ukraine by
sygnałem,
Russia, were the
powiedzmy
first
szczerze, różnie
signal
odczytanym w Europie,
that different
który
people
stał się
interpreted
impulsem
in
do
different ways
kolejnych
in Europe,
kroków w kierunku
put it
wspólnej
mildly,
europejskiej
but
polityki.
that was another step towards a
Takim ruchem było
common
uruchomienie
European
procedury
policy.
PESCO, czyli stałej współpracy strukturalnej
PESCO
w dziedzinie
procedure,
obrony i
the
bezpieczeństwa
permanent
oraz
cooperation
Europejskiego Funduszu
on
Obrony,
security was one of these
którego
steps.
celem jest
The European
finansowanie
Defence Fund
wspólnych prac badawczych
was another step of
w
that
zakresie
sort.
rozwoju i sprzętu wojskowego.
And we started
Kolei
some
22
cooperation in terms of
luty
military equipment.
2022 roku to data, która na
24th
trwale zapisze
February
się w historii naszego
2022 is a
kontynentu.
date that will
To
remain
początek pełnoskalowej,
very pertinent in the
nieuzasadnionej
future of
wojny
our
wywołanej
continent, the beginning
brutalnym
of a
atakiem Rosji na
full-scale
Ukrainę.
war started
Wojny,
by
która trwa nadal.
the unlawful attack of Russia
Dla
on
wielu
Ukraine. And this war
niewyobrażalne stało się faktem.
is
W
still
XXI
on.
wieku
This is something
oglądamy
that
obrazy,
many
które
people
znaleźliśmy
found unbelievable.
z podręczników
It's the
historii
21st century,
o
but
II
we're
wojnie
seeing
światowej.
images that
Szczyt NATO w
we
Madrycie
had only known from
jednoznacznie
textbooks
określił,
on
że to Rosja
the
jest
Second World
krajem,
War.
które zagraża
The
naszemu
Madrid
bezpieczeństwu.
summit made it very clear that
Ukraina
Russia is
aspirująca
the
do Unii
country that is a
Europejskiej
threat
i
to our
Sojuszu
security.
Północnoatlantyckiego,
Ukraine, with its
broniąc się
aspiration
przed agresorem,
to the EU and
ustami swego prezydenta
NATO,
wielokrotnie podkreśla,
is
że walczy
defending
nie
against the
tylko o
aggressor.
swoją
And
niepodległość,
as Ukraine's
ale i o bezpieczeństwo
president
naszego
said
regionu.
on many occasions, the Ukrainians
20
are not
stycznia
only
tego roku
fighting for their own
cały
independence, but
demokratyczny
also
świat
for the
wspierający
safety and
Ukrainę
security
humanitarnie,
of
gospodarczo i
the whole
militarnie
region.
był silny
Until
siłą
January
Sojuszu,
this year, we were strong
Unii
with the strength of our
Europejskiej
alliance
i
and the
formatem
EU,
o wymiarze globalnym
and a
jak
global
Grupa
format
G7.
like the G7 group, for example, and we
Narracja,
support
która obecnie
Ukraine.
płynie za Atlantyku,
The narrative
stawia
we are
przed
hearing
nami
from
wiele
across the
znaków
Atlantic
zapytania.
today
Nie słyszymy nic
puts
o
forward a
artykule
lot of
5
question
Traktatu
marks ahead of us. We
Waszyngtońskiego.
have not been hearing anything about
Wybaczcie
Article
szczerość, ale z mojej
5,
perspektywy
and
nastąpiło przebudzenie Europy.
perfectly
Stary
blunt,
kontynent dojrzał
I think
do
Europe has now
świadomości
woken
zagrożeń
up.
oraz
The
zdał sobie
old
sprawę,
continent has
że
now
o naszym
realized what the
bezpieczeństwie
threats are
stanowi
and is
artykuł
realizing
3
that it's
przywołanego
Article 3
traktatu.
of the North
Konieczne
Atlantic
są
Treaty
kroki,
that
które
is the
sprawią,
bread and butter
że
of our
Europejczycy
security.
znów czuć się będą
As a
bezpieczni.
result, these are the steps that have to be undertaken
Wiele tematów,
in order to make
które
sure that
rozważamy,
Europeans feel safe again.
Jest również kwestia
Many
potencjału
of the things we
militarnego
are looking
Europy.
at pertain to
pytanie,
the
które jest
military
tematem naszej
potential of
sesji.
Europe.
Siły zbrojne Unii Europejskiej.
The
Potrzeba
EU armed
czy
forces,
alternatywa?
whether they are a necessity or
Przyznam,
an
że
alternative,
posiadam własne zdanie w
that's
tym
a
temacie.
very important question.
Formowałem
I
dwie
do
grupy
have my
bojowe Unii
own
Europejskiej, wysyłałem
opinion
swoje
on this.
jednostki
I
do
myself
Afganistanu,
sent my
dowodziłem
troops to
kontyngentem
Afghanistan.
Iraku.
I
Ale bardziej
co-created
zajmuje mnie,
EU combat
nas,
groups, and I was
wasze
the commander
zdanie
of a contingent in
na ten
Iraq.
temat.
But I'm more interested to hear your opinions about this.
Thank you very much. Good morning, colleagues. Time to wake up. Right now, thousands of Ukrainian children do not know if their parents are alive. 10 of thousands of children have been abducted and taken to Russia. Hundreds of thousands more are trapped in a broken system, displaced, separated, and lost. 3 years into Russia's full-scale war, the human toll is staggering. Millions displaced, thousands of children stolen, family torn apart forever. And yet, we hear growing voices repeating Putin's narrative, calling for dialogue and ceasefire, and if that alone could stop the bombing. And yet, in the real world, the bombing continues against civilians and civilian infrastructure. Every night, Ukraine cities are attacked. 147 drones last night, 100 the night before, 114 the night before that. Civilian infrastructure is deliberately targeted. Energy grids, farmland, entire communities. These are war crimes. Yet some still act as if a ceasefire would be a generous gesture from Putin. Let us not forget what has already happened. Hundreds of thousands of combatants killed. Veterans left with disabilities and deep mental scars that will affect Ukraine for generations. Families of veterans and their children suffering continues. The attack of Ukraine's nuclear power plants, a reckless attack on all of us and international security. The use of illegal and inhumane weapons, chemical weapons, phosphorus, cluster munitions, landmines, polluting Ukraine's fields and making farmland unusable. Let's not forget, Ukraine is one of the world's most important food producer and fed 400 million people worldwide through its agriculture before the war. Only a fraction of them today are currently supplied with enough grain. Putin's aim is first to cause hunger and then migration in order to increase the pressure on our European border, to cause unrest and to destroy our society from within. This is the reality, and yet we drip-feed weapons to Ukraine, fighting with one hand tied behind its back. They have fought with extraordinary courage, yet we never let them win. We never allowed them to reach a position of strength to negotiate. And now we hear voices asking for normalize, even as Ukraine bleeds. And I hear these days voices grow louder, repeating Putin's narrative. We hear talk of a ceasefire as if bombs are not still falling, as if Ukrainians are not still dying. We must not allow Putin to rewrite history. If we fail to hold him accountable, if we fail to strengthen Ukraine, this war will return and more suffering will follow. Though what do we do now? Yes, Europe has woken up. Too late to be a negotiation table, but not too late to ensure that Ukraine can get to that table. And that is strong when it gets there. That is why we must move forward very fast. And I welcome the new defense initiatives. The defense package, Readiness 2030 and Rearm Europe are essential steps. The white paper on European defense provides a path forward for integration, readiness, and support for Ukraine. But it's not enough. Let me be clear. A European army is not an alternative to NATO. It is a necessity. The path to a European army is long and complex, but we must start now. I know that many in your countries insist that there are solely responsibility for the defense, but let's not fool ourselves. Not one country in the European Union is able to efficiently protect its citizens from attacks on its own. Not one nation in the European Union has even remotely built up its capacity in recent years. On the contrary, at the end of the Cold War, we were so drunk on the fact that the history of wars in Europe had ended that we ran away from reality. We are surrounded by autocrats who want to change borders in violation of international law, just like Russia has already done for 11 years now. If Europe has a common army, would Russia have a dare to invade Ukraine? I believe the answer is no. And let us be honest. Ukraine soldiers are the most effective deterrent against Russia today. They are fighting for the country, but also for our security. That is why we must continue providing them with weapons, intelligence, and support. Our governments are already setting up a coalition of the willing, ready to organize our military capabilities more effectively. While US security guarantee would be preferable, Europe has the capacity. We must now find the will to organize and act. To do this, Europe must become competitive. This is more than spending on defense. It means removing regulations that do not advance our economy, but rather shackle it. We cannot have red tape slowing military mobility. We also need a single European market when it comes to security policy issues. It is absurd what rules there are in Europe alone when it comes to implementing military mobility. If we act now, Europe will be stronger than Russia overnight. A European armed forces would guarantee security at a lower cost with greater strength and without sacrificing our democratic principles. Colleagues, when we leave this room and return home, I want us to truly reflect. Sometimes we must be brutal. We must confront the numbers, the facts, the reality. And as parliamentarians, it is our duty to be honest with our citizens. The choice is not between NATO and European army. The real choice is between security and uncertainty. Europe has the economy, the technology, the people to defend itself. What we need now is a political will. Our enemies need to know that we are not just talking about peace and freedom, but that we are also prepared to defend this freedom. We will not stand by and watch, as some presidents believe they can redivide Europe and turn the world order upside down. Let's stop debating, let's start making it a reality. Let's remember what is happening beyond these walls. not in our reports, not in our meetings, but on the battlefield, where soldiers are dying as we speak. That is the reality. It should feel uncomfortable. Take that home with you. Now to our panel. Thank you very much.
Maria, thank you for your address. Dear colleagues, our first keynote speaker of this session is Mr. Paweł Zalewski, Secretary of State at the Ministry of National Defense. Paweł, floor is for you.
Dear chairpersons, thank you very much. Dear colleagues, I'm absolutely conscious why I was invited to participate in this session. I am Secretary of State in Polish Ministry of Defense, but I'm also a parliamentarian. So let me speak here more than your colleague, than Polish official. If you allow, I will switch into Polish. Atak Rosji na Ukrainę podważył porządek międzynarodowy w Europie,
has undermined
budowany
the
na
international order in Europe based on the
międzynarodowego
respect
prawa
for international
i
law
założeniu niezmienności granic przy użyciu
and the
siły.
assumption
To
of
jest pierwszy wniosek, jaki
non-changeability
wyciągamy
of
z tych wydarzeń, które przecież nie zaczęły się 3 lata
borders.
temu.
And this is
To
the
mają swoją
conclusion
znacznie głębszą
that
genezę,
we draw
znacznie
from
głębszą niż
the developments that started
2014
earlier
rok.
than 3 years ago,
I
and
od
actually
początku
earlier than
wspólnota
2014. And to start with, the transatlantic
niestety z
community,
wyjątkiem naszych
unfortunately,
węgierskich
with the
przyjaciół,
exception of our
była
Hungarian
zjednoczona
friends,
w
was
woli
united,
powstrzymania Rosji i
stood
pomocy
united in
napadniętej
fending
Ukrainie.
off Russia and helping Ukraine
To
under
wsparcie
the
było
pressure
różne,
from
w zależności
Russia. The
od
support varied,
od państw,
depending
które brały w nim
on
udział,
a
ale
country,
wszystkie państwa
but all
miały wspólne
countries
spojrzenie na to, kto jest
did
ofiarą
share
tego
a
ataku,
view
a kto
on
jest oprawcą, kto
who
jest
the oppressor was
agresorem.
and who the
pozwólcie, że w
victim
tym kontekście
was. And may I take
zwrócę nasze spojrzenie
this
na drugą
as a point
stronę
of departure
oceanu, bo niezależnie
and
od
may
tego,
I
jak dużo mówimy
through a glimpse
o europejskich
over the
zdolnościach
Atlantic,
obronnych,
because whatever we
przecież
say
ten
about
kontekst
European
wspólnoty
defense
transatlantyckiej,
capability,
współpracy
the
ze Stanami
context
Zjednoczonymi jest absolutnie
of transatlantic collaboration
chcę powiedzieć, że mamy pełną
is the
świadomość
close relationship with the United States. Now we do understand the importance of
mamy pełną świadomość,
American leadership in the NATO. We are fully aware as a Secretary of State and the Ministry of Defense. We do appreciate the military capability that is shared with the alliance by the US, and when we talk about the coalition of the willing,
wielu mówi, iż
many say
ta misja na Ukrainie nie
that
będzie możliwa
the Ukrainian mission
wsparcia amerykańskiego, bez
will never be
amerykańskich
possible
zdolności. To
without
pokazuje,
American
w którym miejscu
support,
jest
with the
Europa.
support of European
pokazuje, w którym miejscu
capabilities.
jesteśmy
This
wszyscy.
actually demonstrates the position of Europe and demonstrates
Popieramy
where we all
amerykański postulat większego
at.
zaangażowania Europy w obronie swoich
Now we do
interesów. To
obviously
jest
support
oczywiste.
more responsibility on
Polska robi
the
to
shoulders
już od
of Europeans to
dłuższego czasu.
defend
Myślę,
itself.
że to wszyscy tutaj
Poland
wiedzą.
and its friends, and Poland
4,7
has
PKB na obronność
has done
w
its
tym roku,
homework, spending
pokazuje
4.7% of its
determinację.
GDP. That's
Jednak
is a
to muszę
token of
powiedzieć z
our
przykrością,
resolve. However, and
zwraca
I'm
naszą uwagę
saying this sadly,
transakcyjne podejście do ładu międzynarodowego.
we see the transactional
I odejście
approach
od
to
podstawowych
international
norm,
order and the
podstawowych
deviation
wartości
from underlying
wyznaczających
norms and
relacje
standards and
międzynarodowe.
values that
Traktowanie agresora
define
jako
the
pełnoprawnego
international
uczestnika
order. To
stosunków
treat an
międzynarodowych
aggressor or as a
budzi
fully
nasz
fledged
opór.
party to international
Rezygnacja
relations
zasady
is
terytorialnego
disconcerting.
status quo
And
na
the
rzecz
resignation
terytorialnych
from
roszczeń
territorial status quo
otwiera
to
drogę do światowego chaosu.
leaving
Niszczy
doors open for
jedność Zachodu.
territorial claims is destructive for the
Zachodu to jest
unity of the
wielka
West. Now,
wartość.
the unity of
Wiemy
the
o tym, że
West
Putinowi,
is a big value in
gdy atakował
itself.
Ukrainę, chodziło
We know
po pierwsze o
that
podporządkowanie Ukrainy,
when
ale także o
Putin
zniszczenie jedności
was aggressive
Zachodu.
and attacked
Po
Ukraine,
osiągnięciu tego celu
he
stworzył
was
możliwości
saying
dla
that it was
Rosji,
about
a także dla innych
destroying the
agresorów,
West.
wszczynania kolejnych wojen
After
w
he's
celu
done
realizacji swoich
this in his
imperialnych ambicji.
imagination, he would continue realizing his
Teraz,
imperial ambitions,
Przechodzę do
if that
kwestii
were to
europejskiej
happen. Now,
obronności.
let me move to European
Otóż,
defense.
z radością witamy te
Now,
wszystkie
it
działania,
is
które zostały
with joy
podjęte
that we welcome
po,
all the initiatives
pełnoskalowej
that
agresji
followed
na
the full-scale
Ukrainę w
invasion
Europie. I ta świadomość, rosnąca świadomość zagrożenia, że Rosja
invasion
nie jest partnerem
of
do robienia
Ukraine.
interesów. Nie
Now,
jest tym
people have
krajem,
come to
dzięki
understood
któremu
that
mamy tanie
Russia is not a
surowce
party
energetyczne i możemy się
do
rozwijać.
business with,
Ale robi to
with
po to,
crude
żeby nas
oil
uzależnić od siebie, by móc
that we
atakować,
can
by
buy
móc
and
podporządkować
burn
swoich sąsiadów.
and eat
A
ourselves.
cele
It is
rosyjskie zostały
selling
zdefiniowane
oil
w
and
2021
gas
roku i one
in
nie
order to
ograniczają się
subdue
przecież
us.
do
And these
krajów, które
objectives
kiedyś tworzyły Związek Sowiecki. One
were
wchodzą
formed
bardzo głęboko w
much
Europę
earlier
Środkową.
on,
Bardzo
and
głęboko
in fact,
wchodzą w
the
Europę
ambitions
Środkową.
do
W
not
NATO,
only
w
touch
Unię-
former
w
Soviet
Unię
Union
Europejską.
republics, but they,
I
or even the Eastern
świadomość,
bloc. The ambitions
Rosja jest
reach far. So this
który może na nas
awareness that Russia
jest
is the enemy,
absolutnie
is
kluczowa
the source of hostility,
dla
is absolutely
naszego myślenia
key
o europejskiej obronności.
as
Tutaj
we
też
think
muszę
about
powiedzieć, że
European
jedność
defense. And I
Europy w
have
tej
to say
sprawie
that the
jest
unity of
wyzwaniem.
Europe
Nie
is a
jest dana.
challenge. It's not
Bo
a
jak
given.
przyglądamy się
It's not taken to be taken for
dyskusji
granted,
w niektórych
because
państwach
when we
europejskich,
observe the debates
to
and the
widzimy, że są
discourse
siły, które
in
traktują
certain member
Rosję
states,
nie
we see
jako
that there are forces out there
potencjalnego
that see
agresora,
Russia not as a potential
ale jako
aggressor,
partnera.
but as a partner.
I mogę powiedzieć, że również w
And
Polsce jest taka siła, ona się nazywa Konfederacja, więc nie
in
będę
Poland
wskazywał
we have
na żadne inne
that
państwa,
force as well.
gdzie
They're
może są
called
bardziej znane
Confederation,
ugrupowania,
Konfederacja.
także my tutaj mamy ten problem.
I'm not going to
A więc to jest wielkie wyzwanie,
point a finger
aby
at
utrzymać
other countries.
jedność
Now
europejską.
we
Ta
have-
jedność europejska będzie
we have
utrzymana tylko
those
wtedy,
people,
kiedy będziemy
at
mieli jedno
home.
zdanie.
So having
odnośnie
said
tego,
that,
jakie zagrożenie,
European unity
tworzy
will only be
Rosja.
preserved if we
I
have a
wracając
shared
do tych
view
najnowszych
of who
inicjatyw, do Białej Księgi,
who the aggressor
do Rearm
is.
Europe, chcę
So
powiedzieć, że
back
bardzo
to
cieszę,
the
iż
white paper
wśród
and
tych
back to
priorytetów,
Rearm Europe,
które Unia będzie realizowała,
it is
znajdują się te, o które
exhilarating
my
to see
wnosiliśmy.
that Europe is about
tarcza
things that we all
Kluczowa
have
rzecz,
always
ona nie
wanted.
dotyczy tylko państw bałtyckich i polskich.
Shield
To jest przecież
East,
linia graniczna
absolutely
NATO,
essential
Unii Europejskiej.
on the borderline of
Obrona przed atakami z powietrza,
between NATO
military
and
mobility,
Russia, military mobility,
amunicja, drony,
munitions, drones,
artyleria.
artillery.
To są te ważne, kluczowe
are
obszary.
the
Jestem
key
przekonany, że
areas.
tutaj znajdziemy porozumienie.
And this is
No, ale też
where
musimy sobie zdać sprawę,
I am confident we're going
gdzie
to
jesteśmy.
find
Otóż,
agreement, but we need to understand where we are.
nie wiemy,
Now, we do
kiedy,
not
na jakich
know
warunkach
when
zakończą
and in
się
what
te
terms
straszliwe działania wojenne, które
these atrocities of
bestialska
the
Rosja
current
wywołała na Ukrainie.
war will
Ale
end.
wszyscy mamy poczucie, że
The
ten
bestiality
proces
of Russia,
szukania jakiejś formuły
when
rozejmu
will it
się
end
zaczął.
and on what
I teraz
terms?
pytanie
But the
jest
process
takie,
may
jakie
have
wnioski
started.
wyciągnie Europa
Now, what
z
are
tego,
the
że ten
lessons
rodzaj
learned
zostanie
for Europe
ogłoszony?
when
Otóż,
that
czy
truce
to będzie oznaczało,
is
że będziemy
announced
uważali, a
one
niektórzy w
day?
niektórych stolicach tak
Are we
sądzą,
going to believe?
że
And
mamy
some people in some
kolejny
capitals
okres,
do believe
wielu
that.
lat
Are
na
we going to
przygotowanie się.
believe
Czy
that
odwrotnie?
here we
Czy
are, we're going to
dostrzeżemy,
have a long
że po
spell
Ukrainie
to prepare for
mogą
another
być państwa
conflict?
NATO?
Or
I teraz, jeżeli
can there
zastanawiamy się
be
nad
NATO
wydatkowaniem
countries
środków,
in
które
this part
Unia Europejska
of Europe?
przygotowuje dla
Now, are we
naszych
going to be
przemysłów
ready
obronnych?
to
Musimy
spend
sobie
the
odpowiedzieć na
money
pytanie.
on defense
Co jest pierwszym
industries?
celem?
Now, what is the first objective of that
Bo tych celi
exercise
jest
in the
kilka,
first place?
tylko
Now, there are
jest
several.
pytanie o priorytety.
Let's prioritize,
Co jest
I
pierwszym celem?
suppose. What
Czy pierwszym
is
celem jest
the
zapełnienie
top
magazynów
priority?
wojskowych?
Is it to
Tak,
fill the military
mogli się bronić. A
warehouses
to ma swoje konsekwencje.
in order for us to be
Bo wiemy doskonale,
able to defend
że przemysł
ourselves?
obronny
Now, that has
w Europie,
consequences.
który ma
We
olbrzymi
know
potencjał,
perfectly
który
well that
musi
the
być
industry,
rozwijany i Polska w tym
defense industry in
uczestniczy
Europe,
w wielu
with its
programach
great
europejskich,
potential,
będzie
and
uczestniczył.
Poland is part and
Ale że
parcel
ten
of
przemysł
many
obronny nie
European
jest w stanie dostarczyć dzisiaj odpowiedniej
initiatives,
liczby
we know that this industry is not capable of securing
czołgów,
sufficient numbers of tanks and howitzers
broni, obrony powietrznej.
and air defense
I tak dalej. A więc, że
weaponry,
musimy także
and so on and so
współpracować z innymi
forth.
partnerami,
So we have to
z którymi
work
współpracować
together
możemy.
with our
Czy też
partners, the partners
to
that
jest
we
ta
can work
alternatywa.
together with. Or,
Myślimy o tym,
that's the
że
alternative,
zacznie się znowu era długiego pokoju.
are we going to think
I
that
będziemy
this
mogli,
long era of
spokoju,
peace
zwiększać nasze
will
zdolności.
ensue and we will
Co jest
be
niezbędne,
able to take
co
our
jest
time
potrzebne,
as we
co jest warunkiem
increase our
zdolności
capabilities,
Europy do obrony. Ale jeżeli to
which is
zagrożenie
obviously
może iść z Rosji szybko,
a positive
a taka możliwość istnieje i to wszystkie
thought
wywiady
in
państw,
itself.
które są
But
tutaj
if that
reprezentowane,
march,
na to wskazują.
if this
Wszystkie wywiady.
march
O tym mówią.
of Russia onward
Wniosek
is
jest
going to happen
absolutnie
quickly,
jednoznaczny.
and all the
I ostatnia
intelligence
rzecz, Armia
suggests that
Europejska.
it may happen,
Oczywiście,
that this is
do
a
tej pory
wrong
istniał pewien
approach.
podział.
Now, so far
Logiczny
we've
podział,
had
biorąc
a
pod uwagę
logical
zdolności.
divide
Na
when
te
it
siły
comes to
szybkiego
capabilities.
reagowania,
We have
które
had the divide
mogą
between
działać, europejskie siły
rapid
szybkiego reagowania,
response,
które mogą
European
działać w warunkach
rapid
kryzysu.
response capabilities that can
Tuż przy naszych
function
granicach.
in
To jest
contingencies
potrzebne.
near
To są
our
zdolności,
borders,
które
very
Europa
much
powinna
essential, very
posiadać
much
i
indispensable.
To są zdolności na
And
naszą możliwość
this is
dziś.
what we should have
Ale niezależnie od
to the best
wszystkiego,
of our
niezależnie od
abilities
tego, jak się
today, but
potoczą losy świata i
irrespective
Zachodu,
of
to
whatever
NATO
the
dzisiaj
fortune
ma
of the West
procedury,
is,
to NATO dzisiaj ma plany,
it's the NATO
to
that
NATO
has
dzisiaj ma całe
procedures, it's the NATO that
oprzyrządowanie
has plans, it's
związane
the NATO
z
that has the
obroną
entire
przed Rosją.
apparatus of defense against
I
Russia.
NATO dzisiaj jest
And it's the
niezastępowane.
NATO that
I
is
dlatego dobrze,
irreplaceable,
że biała
and
księga
it is
pokazuje
absolutely
tę
positive and
komplementarność
good that the white
Europy
paper
i NATO pokazuje,
shows the
że
complementarity
Europa
of
powinna
Europe
mobilizować
and
swój
the
gigantyczny
NATO. It
potencjał
shows that Europe
gospodarczy
should mobilize
do
a
tego,
gigantic
co powinno być jej
economic
zadaniem,
potential
czyli tak
to
naprawdę do stworzenia
its
możliwości
task,
finansowych,
and
technicznych
its
do
task is to
wypełniania planów
create
natowskich.
frameworks,
natowskie
financial
tworzą
and
gwarancje dla naszego
economic, in order to
bezpieczeństwa.
fulfill the
I
NATO
na koniec,
plans, because they guarantee
artykuł
our
5
security.
traktatu
And last but not least, Article 5
waszyngtońskiego jest absolutnie
of the
kluczowy.
Washington Treaty is absolutely
nie budzi
key.
W Polsce i nigdy nie budził żadnych wątpliwości.
And there have been no doubts about this
I zawsze
ever in
będziemy
Poland,
działać
and we will
na rzecz tego,
always
aby ten artykuł
support
był wiarygodny. I tylko on
the
jego
concept
wiarygodność
of this
podtrzymuje.
article
Dziękuję bardzo.
being reliable. Because
Thank you very much. Now let me give the floor to our third keynote speaker, Ms. Ivana Klimpuch, Chair of the Committee on Ukraine Integration into the EU. Ivana, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair, dear colleagues. Let me try to start from a phrase by the Kyiv-born late Prime Minister of Israel, Golda Meir. She said once that you cannot negotiate peace with someone who came to kill you. So if we are discussing some alternatives today, we in Ukraine do not have many alternatives. We just have the way to survive. And that's the only alternative that we are to pursue. Let me use another quote. Churchill has said that Americans always take the right decisions after having tried all the wrong ones. So I'm sure that we here all share the hope and the expectation that the United States will return to Europe. But at the same time, we have to understand that Europe has to learn how to provide for its own security. And it has to be ready to do that without the US support, notwithstanding the fact that it was the United States itself who actually provided and created that dependency after the Second World War. So the message from my perspective is clear. Irrespectively of further developments, nurture the American alliance, but waste no time fortifying your own power. Once again, we do not have the alternatives today. We just have the harsh reality. And in that harsh reality, I welcome the words of the incoming German Chancellor, who has said that Germany is returning. That dedication and that desire should be welcomed by all of us. It seems that one of the first steps in the upcoming European defense can be the creation of the axis of London, Paris, Berlin, Warsaw, and Kyiv. That can provide for one of the first pillars of the European security. We in Ukraine do have the most potent and most capable army in Europe. Poland, with its contribution of 5%, almost 5% of its GDP to its security and defense, has also all the possibilities to create some similar force. I also think that Britain can and should lead the coalition of the willing. France can and should take charge of Europe's nuclear independence from the United States. And Germany can and should deliver the financial firepower to make all of this possible. If Europe delivers on all these pillars, everything else can follow. And I think the shift is irreversible. The old order is definitely gone. One of the next steps, we have to think how to give up consensus principle for the defense issues and for defense matters in Europe. This is, as far as I understand, is being in the making already. Europe has to realize that the more it will be keeping its eyes wide shut, the greater is the probability that the impressive alliance of consent will be lost forever. Europe has to realize, and rather sooner and rather better than better than later, that caravan of summits is not going to protect us. Caravan of summits is not shooting, is not defending, is not fighting. It cannot function as artillery or air defense or multiple launch rocket system or drone or jamming equipment. So real actions are needed, and real actions are needed already yesterday. Europe has to recognize that security is a value. Obviously, all values of the Lisbon Treaty are very, very important. However, without real underpinning of security, no lasting prosperity and no predictability can be achieved. Coalition of the willing that is being formed right now and that is being discussed is very much appreciated. However, its real weight will be defined if, as a result, the European Defence Alliance will be formed, with Ukraine being an integral part of it. The full development of the European defence will, I think, take place in the concentric circles, which will overlap and gradually strengthen the whole structure. Nevertheless, we cannot wait until we have an ideal plan. We need to start implementing different initiatives which might not be yet ideal, but are efficient and delivering the results already today. The litmus test that would signify that European political elites have recognized the value of security will be change in rhetoric and change in action. Instead of, we will stand with Ukraine as long as it takes, or even, we will stand with Ukraine whatever it takes, there should be, and that many of you might find scary, we are a direct party to this confrontation. Our societies, our citizens have to realize that, while our authorities have to act upon this recognition. If not, autocrats will make you a party to this war without you knowing of it, without your participation. If we will give up on security as one of the main values for the sake of social benefits, we will lose both. Remember, together we are much more stronger than Putin is. Economically, militarily, technologically, we just have to use all these capabilities and act upon them. Many of you here yesterday have been mentioning the need for strategy, for clear strategy, both towards the EU, the Russian Federation, and on development of common defense and security. As much as I agree with that, a vision definitely has to be clarified, but our goal should not be to predefine a ready-made plan for the next 20 years. At present, time efficiency in actions should be the top priority. Of course, we need a strategic goal, but there will be many possible tactical four-ways along the way, and not all of them might be even successful. So Europe should stop deceiving itself and accept that a monstrous common enemy is at your doorstep. And brave, resolute Ukrainians, with your generous support, are holding that tsunami of evil from pouring into Europe. But this is time to use all the ability and strength to stop and defeat that enemy. This means putting aside many of your internal secondary differences and even some of the historic discussions. We do not have an alternative. To preserve the future, we must act now. And maybe, as a second thought, the alternative is to make sure that Russia is feeling and is going through a strategic defeat, that Russia is punished, that Russia is held at bay with its ambitions and its imperial appetites. And that is probably the only alternative we have. So let's pursue it. Thank you.
Thank you. Now let me give the floor to our next speaker, Mr. Timo Pessonen, Director General for Defense Industry and Space, European Commission. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, dear Mr. Chair, Madam Chair, colleagues. There can't be any better place than Warsaw and the Sejm to talk about defense at this stage. The history is here with us. Polish people have fought for their freedom and continue to do so, as have been doing all of us in Europe. And the latest, of course, are Ukrainian fellows who are fighting on our behalf. I will try to give some punchy messages, I hope, on what's happening with let's say, white paper and the initiative we are preparing. And I fully agree with Mrs. Klimbush-Cinchace that there is one thing is to be strategic and have a mid to long-term strategies, but we need to act now, and we need to get our act together. We should have been able to do that already yesterday, or day before, or years before, but I think this is the crucial moment. The post-Cold War equilibrium will not come back. We have the most serious situation of our lifetimes. So we need to take bold actions to protect our interests and to ensure our security. We are facing the major security threats with the return of high-intensity war in our soil. The Russian military industry is operating at full capacity. Russia has been massively expanding its military industrial and production capacity with an estimated spending in 2024 of up to 9% of the GDP in defense. In 2025, Russia is expected to surpass member states' defense spending in purchasing power parity terms. We have seen the devastating consequences of Russian aggression in Ukraine, and it's essential that we take steps to prevent similar conflicts in the future. At the same time, there are question marks on the air. The United States is pre-prioritizing its security interests towards Indo-Pacific, and it demands Europe to do more for its own defense. This has been already for long. Every US president, since the end of the Cold War, has constantly insisted Europe to take more responsibility and the burden sharing of our own security. So we have to do this. So it has come time to Europe to rearm. We need to be ready for potential attacks by latest 2030. All the public intelligence information shared by the member states' intelligence services give the same message. Putin is preparing Russia to arm and to test even NATO Article 5 in the European continent. So we need to invest more in defense. We want peace, and therefore we must be ready for war. This is the objective of the Rearm Europe presented by President von der Leyen. In this context, the White Paper on European Defence Readiness by 2030 sets 4 key priorities for defence readiness in 2030. First, we need to provide unwavering support to Ukraine through increased military support and the integration of Ukrainian defence industry into the European defence industrial base. We propose the establishment of an EU-Ukraine task force to foster procurement and industrial collaboration. European companies are investing in Ukraine, and they should do even so more, establish joint ventures, and bring together Ukrainian capabilities and innovation capacity with the European industrial and manufacturing machinery. We also need to plug critical defense capability gaps, most notably those identified through EU and NATO defense planning. So we are working hand in hand with NATO, as also Mr. State Secretary underlined. There is no duplication. The White Paper underlines really clearly the message that we are in this together. and we need to use the expertise of the NATO colleagues in identifying, together with the member states, the defense capability gaps. We need to promote increased defense readiness by strengthening military mobility, as Mrs. Strack-Zimmermann also underlined in her opening remarks. And we need to promote stockpiling to speed up the availability of defense products. And we need to strengthen the European defense industry by increasing demand predictability, working towards simplification and acceleration of the transformation of defense through disruptive technologies such as AI, quantum, and so forth. So we need to keep up the innovation spirit in the European defense industry. We need to continue supporting also SMEs and startups to come to our industrial chains and to bring, a new light to the European defense industry. A few words about the Rearm Europe plan. The white paper sets the strategic vision, but not only that. It also creates the condition for a unique defense investment surge. With the Rearm Europe plan, the Commission is creating the conditions to unlock 800 billion euros of defense expenditures in the coming years. It also has 4 pillars. First, activation of the national escape clause of the Stability and Growth Pact, which could mobilize additional defense expenditure up to 1.5% of the GDP. So-called SAFE instrument, Security Action for Europe, raising up to 150 billion on capital markets, providing loans to member states backed by the EU budget. And contribution from the European Investment. EIB finally taking bold decisions, and they still have some mile to go, and I hope that they will continue to do so, that the EIB is fully backing the investments also on defense. And last but not least, public money is never enough. We need to mobilize the private capital by reaping the full benefits of the savings and the investment union. The SAFE instrument is a new instrument to significantly increase member states' investments in defense capabilities. Up to 150 billion loans, as I said, for interested member states. It's a voluntary, what the Commission is offering, at a comparably low interest rates, lower interest rates than most of the member states can get from the market. SAFE will allow member states and certain partners to procure defense products in areas identified by the EU heads of state and government on 6th of March. The rule will be common procurement. A specific limited exemption is foreseen considering the urgency. Member states can start in solo for a limited time, provided they take the necessary steps to extend their contracts to new partners. We need to accelerate the delivery lead times, and to cut the red tape, we propose several incentives and simplifications. Contracts under these instruments are VAT exempted. Member states are allowed to modify existing contracts to increase quantities for new partners and place new contracts directly as a matter of urgency. So really getting member states to procure together on the critical defense capabilities. Stability and Growth Pact, it is giving an additional fiscal capacity to member states. So when member states are facing exceptional circumstances outside their control, they are allowed to use flexibility in budgetary deficit. I know that Poland has for a long insisted this exemption, and now the Commission is putting that into the table. This was the case during the COVID crisis. Now we propose a more coordinated use of the so-called national escape clause, allowing member states to transition to a much higher level of defense spending. And this we will request the activation of the clause by the end of April for the Council adoption in July. As I said, we are mobilizing the financial ecosystem in support of defense. EIB reviewed its lending policy, is positive, but I think they can even do more. And the private banks, I know that there are several private banks who are leading by example. They are telling to the fellow financial institutions, to the pension funds, that it's actually fully sustainable, it is ethical, it is beneficial to invest on defense industry. To conclude, we must make bold choices to build on the defense union that ensures peace on our continent through unity and strength. We owe it to our NATO allies, to Ukraine, and to ourselves, to our citizens, and for the values we stand for. And no misunderstanding. No misunderstanding. The Commission is not taking over responsibilities from member states that remain in the driving seat on defense matters. We act where we can complement and support, and we are not duplicating NATO. We are working in full compliance, in cooperation, ahead of the NATO summit and the European Council in June. and the parliamentary support is the key. Without that, we go nowhere. Thank you very much for your attention, and Slava Ukraini.
Dziękuję bardzo za Państwa wystąpienia.
Thank you very
Moi
much
drodzy,
for your
przechodzimy
addresses.
do debaty.
Dear colleagues,
Uprzejmie przypominam,
let's
że
move
na podstawie
to the
Państwa
debate.
zgłoszeń za pośrednictwem
Let me
formularza
remind you that you have
została utworzona lista mówców.
registered to
Będzie
take the
ona
floor,
wyświetlana
and the list of
na
speakers
ekranach. Gdyby ktoś z
will be
Państwa
displayed
chciał
on
jeszcze
the
zapisać się do
screens.
głosu,
If anyone
bardzo
else
proszę o
should
wypełnienie
like to
formularza znajdującego się na Państwa
add
podpisie i
his or
przekazanie
her
go
name to the
pracownikom
list,
sekretariatu konferencji.
please approach the
Głos zabierają
secretariat
Państwo z
of the
przydzielonego
conference.
miejsca, a
You will be
uruchomienie i
speaking from
włączenie
your
mikrofonu
seat,
następuje po naciśnięciu przycisku.
and you will be asked
Mamy wiele
to
zgłoszeń,
switch on the
dlatego ustalam
microphone
czas
by
wypowiedzi
pressing
na
a button.
1 minutę.
Speaking
Bardzo
time,
proszę o
1 minute,
wnioski,
because we have many
tak
speakers.
aby uniknąć wyłączania
Please,
mikrofonu.
let's avoid me
Jako
or my co-chair switching
Pierwszy
off the microphone.
zabierze
The
głos
first to take the floor
pan Koloman Brenner z
will
Węgier.
be Mr. Koloman Brenner from Hungary.
Thank you so much, Chair. Dear colleagues, from the historical perspective, the post-World War II global order is undergoing the second wave of transformation. So we must strengthen our own defense capabilities. If the European Union truly aims to be a geopolitical actor, establishing a common European defense structure is essential. However, this must not create a parallel system to NATO, but rather a complementary force that ensures Europe's strategic autonomy. At the same time, we strongly oppose financing these efforts through joint borrowing. Defense investment must be made with a clear focus on the economic stability of member states. Strengthening our security must not come at the cost of plunging Europe into another debt spiral. Europe's defense must be reinforced, but it must be done in an economically suitable way. Thank you.
Dziękuję bardzo.
Thank you very much
Proszę o
indeed.
głos
Now let
Emily
me give the floor to
Thornberry. Kilka
Emily
pytania.
Thornberry, the UK.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I would like to congratulate the democracies of the European Union for coming together so strongly in support of Ukraine. But we do need to go further, and we need to do that faster. And in Britain, we have 3 requests. The first is the Labour government is eager to sign a security partnership with the EU. It is difficult to believe, really, the reports that we hear that the hold-up seems to be about fish. We do think that it would be difficult for us to explain any of that to any of our constituents. And I agree with our sister from Ukraine, the Ukrainian parliament, that the old order is over and that we do need to have new thinking. The second point is this: the previous Conservative government applied to participate in military mobility, PESCO, and the current Labour government renews that application, and we hope that we will be getting that soon. And the third point is this: the UK delegation is made up of representatives from the 3 main parties, and we all agree that the 300 billion euros of Russian sovereign assets should not just be frozen, but should be seized. We think that it should be used to support Ukraine. We believe that international law is on our side, and it is a question of political will. Slava Ukraine.
Dziękuję bardzo. Proszę o zabranie głosu.
Thank you very
Ronan
much.
Le Gleu, Francja.
Ronan Le Gleu, Francia.
W takim razie proszę Inara Maurice.
Dear colleagues, firstly, facing Russia's aggressive behavior, there's clear need to implement a special Eastern Border Shield plan. Defense and deterrence is solidary responsibility of the EU, not only of some countries bordering Russia. Secondly, Discussion about EU armed forces. The idea of EU armed forces should be viewed not only in the context of turbulent international events, but also taking into account available instruments and steps to strengthen our defense. NATO military presence in the Baltic countries and Poland has increased, which is significantly contribution to collective defense and fulfills the role of any potential EU army. We do not see EU army as necessity. Taking into account geopolitical situation, EU member states have to be united and pragmatic to boost their defense capabilities and focus on priorities and synergy. Thank you.
Bardzo proszę, Michel Galler, Europarlament.
Michel.
What we need is a strategic autonomy of our structures that can be fully functional when recourse to NATO structures is not possible. You know, NATO decides unanimously, one is enough to block. We already have an EU military command, military staff, we have a military planning and conduct capability and a civilian version thereof, and a European Defence Agency. We activated PESCO chapter of the treaty in December 2017. My suggestion is make all such structures operational to an extent that they can serve the purpose. And the purpose is to achieve defense readiness as soon as possible. The purpose is to concretely work on implementing our capability development plans. The purpose is to ramp up common defense planning and procurement so that we can achieve economies of scale and interoperability. Our industry needs this security that they can have long-term planning, and I'm pretty sure that that can be achieved. And we need to support Ukraine, of course, as much as we can. Slava Ukraini once again.
Dziękuję. Gilles Baum, Luxembourg.
Now, Gilles Baum, Luxembourg.
Distinguished delegates, in times of geopolitical instability, I absolutely welcome this discussion, but we must also acknowledge the obstacles, from differing strategic cultures to the eventual relationship with NATO, which remains Europe's primary security provider. This makes a common European army a long-term project rather than an imminent solution. Right now, we cannot afford another slow-moving project. Our priority must be strengthening Europe's defense capacities and deterrence. We need to move towards strategic autonomy. This demands substantial investment, something most governments and parliaments have recognized. We need a unified defense industry moving away from national silos to a consolidated European offer and demand. A bi-European preference where feasible could support this goal. At the military level, we must address critical capability gaps, particularly in the domains of intelligence and reconnaissance, where we are still largely dependent on the US. We also need to boost our interoperability. Ensuring that our armies can operate together requires harmonized command structures and coordinated capabilities. Dear delegates, a common European army surely may be an option that needs to be discussed, but today we must focus on fixing our most urgent defense shortfalls.
Dziękuję. Christo Gashev, Bulgaria.
Thank you. 3 years since the beginning of the war, Ukraine is heavily relying on Europe, and we are still in the discussion phase. That is unacceptable. We have to act really far more faster, and the new white paper on defense is a good step forward, but we need to do it faster than usual. And just a reminder for the European forces that just before the war, in December 21st, Kremlin wanted that NATO borders will be withdrawn up to 97 borders. Let's not give Putin that gift of dissolving NATO and disbalancing the transatlantic bond. EU forces and EU integration must be not a competitor, must be in a support of NATO, because NATO has the capabilities for our own security. And at the end, let's just reread an old speech of President Reagan from '64, time for choosing. It is quite at the time even today.
Dziękuję. Paweł Fischer, Republika Czech.
Thank you, Chair. It's a good news that the European Union is mobilizing. We need to arm ourselves. But even if we put billions of new, fresh money into defense and change nothing, it is a missed opportunity. the European market is fractured, arms production is fragmented. We therefore need to do the work and prepare mechanisms for synergy and cooperation. What do I have in mind concretely? We have the European Defence Agency, as we know all, for example. It is a laboratory for how joint weapons projects and innovation in breakthrough technologies have worked. News that the new Commission, neither Kaja Kallas, Andrius Kubilius or President von der Leyen had yet found an opportunity to meet the head of the European Defence Agency surprised me on a recent visit to Brussels. The European Defence Agency is here, and let us work with it. Thank you.
Proszę, Cesar Sanchez, Hiszpania.
Thank you. Europa ha despertado y ha pasado a una actitud propositiva. Ya lo hicimos con el Pacto Verde, con la agenda
Europe
verde.
has awakened, and we said this when we spoke about Green Deal. Now it's about investing in our defense capabilities and investing in our deterrence capabilities. Now it's linked to our industrial and economic potential. It is about us being able to defend the values that we subscribe to, such as freedom. So we have to continue investing in defense, and we have to do it in this way. We should allocate parts of our budgets on our economy and our industry. So it's a triangle from east to west. And this must be done in order for us to anticipate threats and for us in order to be involved. Thank you.
Thank you for the floor. First, I would like to touch on the credibility of international peace treaties signed by the world superpowers. Given the Ukraine was strict with the Budapest Memorandum, I suggest these things for the EU defense. Invest in knowledge, financially support research and developments, and support the best European universities of natural science and technical universities. Ensure the agreed percentage of GDP for defense in all EU 27 countries. Give a strong boost to our military industry and develop our tactical weapons. If we can make the best passenger airplanes, we can also make the best military aircrafts. Ensure strategic autonomy in several areas, especially in energy, semiconductors, and microprocessors. Improve all critical infrastructure. Establish an effective contingent of rapid reaction forces, which will be complementary to NATO forces. The majority of Europeans are in favor of common defense and security policy, and around 93% agree that EU countries should jointly defend EU territories. Thank you.
Pedro Passencha, Portugalia.
Good morning. The current changes in the international environment with the return of high-intensity war scenarios in military strategy led to a consensus on the need to increase national capabilities and therefore those of Europe. This increase in military capabilities implies a strong increase in financial investment and a much greater development of the industry related to defense. Those circumstances led us to the following questions. What measures are being planned by Europe concerning the urgent need to develop the capacity of the European defense industries? In order to ensure interoperability between the different armed forces, the acquisition of common weapon systems should be carefully anticipated. How will this acquisition be planned and carried out? Is there the possibility for the Union to integrate a command and control body for this purpose? Thank you.
Sabine Tillet, France.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Depuis hier, nous avons tous souligné le lien intrinsèque entre la sécurité de l'Ukraine et le reste de l'Europe. Mais nous
Since
devons
yesterday,
davantage
we
intégrer
have
l'Ukraine dans les
emphasized
initiatives de
the link
développement des
between
capacités de
the
défense
security of
européennes,
Ukraine
s'inspirer
and
de leur expérience.
Europe
Et avant
as
de
a
parler
whole.
d'armées
We should
européennes qui est
get
un
mutually
sujet de long
inspired
terme, et nous
between
avons
Europe
un sujet aussi de
and
court terme. Nous devons,
Ukraine
comme l'a dit aussi
before
le
we
collègue
start
portugais,
discussing a
garantir
European army, which is a further perspective. We have more burning issues to deal with, interoperability. We need to standardize our capabilities far more. We have different anti-drone systems, artillery systems, and air defense systems. Of course, we have to strengthen our capabilities, but concessions need to be made because not all member states will have everything. We have to make a concession. Bernard Guetta, Europarlament.
Mes chers collègues et amis, un jour nous pourrons dire
Dear
j'y étais,
colleagues and
et nous
friends,
saurons regarder
one
avec
day we will
admiration
be able to say, I was there.
et
And
peut-être
some
même
other
envie.
people may
Pourquoi?
look at us
Parce que
with
nous vivons en
admiration,
ce moment même
maybe
dans
with
cette
envy.
salle du
Why?
Sejm,
Because
un
at this very
historique,
moment,
car
in this parliamentary room,
jamais dans son
we're going
histoire,
through a historic
l'unité
moment
européenne
which has
n'a
never,
été aussi forte
ever
qu'elle est aujourd'hui.
happened in
Nous
European
sommes
history. Never
totalement
has
unis.
European
Nous
unity
l'entendons tous depuis
been
hier matin
so
sur tous
strong.
les
We are
sujets les plus
fully united,
fondamentaux.
and we've
Il y a
been
des
saying
nuances,
this
naturellement,
since
mais nous
yesterday
sommes totalement
as we
unis comme nous ne l'avons
as we have
jamais
reviewed
été.
fundamental
C'est la
issues.
première
We
raison
are
d'être confiant
fully
dans
and
l'avenir.
totally
Et la
united as
deuxième,
we
c'est
never have
regarder
been.
à travers le
This is
monde,
one
regarder à nos frontières
factor
le
that
nombre de
allows me to be
foules et de
optimistic. Of course, we
nations
have
qui
to take
descendent
a
dans
look
les rues
around at
pour
our
défendre la
environment and the
liberté
crowds,
et
the
la
nations
démocratie.
taking
La
to the
dictature
streets in
n'a pas
defense
gagné
of
la
democracy
bataille
and
des
freedom.
cœurs.
Dictatorship
La liberté
has
fait
not
toujours
won the
vibrer
hearts
les hommes
of
et c'est pour cela
human
qu'elle
beings.
gagnera. Je vous remercie.
Freedom and values are always the thing that people will fight for. Stefan Tinta,
Dear
Romania.
colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, Europe must prepare to face any inevitable changes by rearming and developing the necessary capabilities with which we can launch real deterrence in response to any expansionist attempts. We Romanians are a peaceful nation and we do not want war. However, this era of benefits of peace was forced to end far too quickly in order to make way for those spheres of influences always eager to destruction. And for Europe to avoid war, Europe must be prepared for possible armed conflict. The Readiness 2030 strategy and the white paper on defense will lead our countries to work even more closely to establish a defense industrial base that represents a strategic advantage for all member countries. I firmly believe that this interstate collaboration will also provide many opportunities for EU countries to share with Romania its in-depth expertise on innovation, weapon technologies, on defense strategies, and the most efficient investment in military infrastructure and mobility. We know that we can always count on each other, and this issue further commits us to the effort that my country will make to remove any gap in our internal capabilities. Only together we can make Europe security indivisible. Thank you.
Proszę, Adrian Dejla, Malta.
Thank you. European Union armed forces are neither alternative. In my mind, neither. It is an obligation and a duty towards our history, a duty towards our common inheritance, a duty towards our heritage, obligation towards our children. We're obligated to bequeath upon them a Europe stronger and safer than we inherited it, obligated to bequeath upon them a Europe. Marianez justly described the aggressors as enemies, because aggressors are not colleagues or counterparts. They are enemies, enemies of our countries, enemies of our way of life, of our values, of what we hold dear, enemies of peace. Aggressors don't understand the language of talk. We need to start acting. Thank you.
Proszę, Eleftherios Ktitakis, Greece.
Thank you. In the core of the present issue, undoubtedly, lies the enhancement of Europe's military and political readiness. Focusing at first on military readiness, it is clear that adequate funding and investments in the defense industry are required, as well as the promotion of flagship projects such as the European Air Defence Shield, which is, as known, a joint proposal of the Prime Ministers of Poland and Greece. Already, at the highest institutional level, it is acknowledged that there is an urgent need to enhance the US defense readiness. Coming to political readiness of the European Union, we should undoubtedly be way more determined and decisive. We should have strong and firm principles and solid attitude, abandoning the double criteria. For example, I can recall another case of military invasion in European Union. I can recall another case of territorial occupation in European Union, of displacement of people. Dear colleagues, we need to have confidence, we need to step up and determine our future in both military and political context and perspective. Thank you.
Proszę, Arsen Bauk, Chorwacja.
Thank you. I will speak on Croatian.
Speak in Croatian, the defense is a national responsibility, but we agree there is a number of advantages to go to this collectively common approach, can reduce costs of equipment, reduce times of delivery, and help and include countries such as the UK and Norway. Status of candidate countries should be such as Albania, North Macedonia, Turkey, and what can be the largest, the biggest challenge to common armed forces of EU is political leadership and decision-making on their use, because these issues and the approach to decision-making would not otherwise be efficient.
Luis Diaz, Portugalia.
Good morning, dear colleagues. The world was changed, and we must acknowledge that. We Europeans must be strong, determined, brave, combative, and resilient. Let us learn this from the immense sacrifice of the Ukrainian people. Only a united Europe can prevail. Only a Europe with great capacity and more investment in defense can compete in this new world. Because dictators only fear and falter before the strongest. Because Europe must work as a common defense community. Yes, I believe we need a joint European force capable of amplifying our individual response at the national level. Yes, we need to stop buying military equipment outside of Europe and losing our strategic autonomy. Yes, it is time to invest in ID and European technology. Dear colleagues, a common problem demands a common solution. Thank you.
Proszę, Pierre-Romain
Tionnet,
Europarlament.
European Parliament.
Dans le contexte de la guerre d'Ukraine, l'axe Est-Ouest domine nos réflexions.
Ukrainian
Le
war,
livre blanc sur la défense européenne accorde d'ailleurs une place écrasante au flanc oriental. La France participe à la dissuasion à l'Est, en Roumanie et en Estonie, dans le ciel balte et au sud de la mer Noire. Mais ce flanc essentiel ne peut être la seule orientation de l'Europe. Sinon, l'Europe sera limitée à sa seule géographie, c'est-à-dire le petit cap de l'Eurasie. Ne négligeons pas l'axe nord-sud, celui qui conduit des djihadistes au cœur de nos villes. Parlons de la mer Rouge, essentielle pour notre économie. N'oublions pas de surveiller les mers et les fonds marins. Pensons à la défense dans l'espace, où se joue notre souveraineté. Ne nous trompons pas de débat en suivant le projet chimérique d'une armée européenne. Soyons fidèles à la devise, unis dans la diversité. Donnons-nous les moyens de porter secours à tout pays européen menacé, mais n'abolissons jamais notre diversité stratégique. Notre rôle n'est pas régional, il est mondial. Je vous remercie.
Strategic diversity is very important because we play a global role.
Savola, Finlandia.
Nikos Savola, Finland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Russia started a war of aggression against Ukraine. Russia cannot be trusted now or in the future. It is a threat to all of us. We have also seen what the Trump administration intends to do. It wants to take less responsibility for Europe and shifts the focus elsewhere, Asia and Indo-Pacific region. That's why we in the Europe must act now. We need more defense industry, we need more troops, we need stronger comprehensive security thinking, especially what President Niinistö was saying yesterday, and we need more funding for defense in the national and EU level. In Finland, we have a common conscription and a strong reserve. Our wartime strength is 280,000 soldiers, and the total number of the reserve is 900,000. Our national defense will is high, and as a frontline state, we are doing our part. That I can guarantee to all of you. Now, everyone and every country in Europe must step up too.
Proszę Alekos Trifonides, Cypr.
Dear colleagues, in light of geopolitical shifts, evaluating the future of European defense is crucial. The need of greater defense integration is underscored by Russian against Ukraine and the complex security challenges the EU face in both the East and South, where outgoing conflicts destabilize the region. We acknowledge the prioritization of European defense in recent months, with significant decisions taken in enhance the EU capacity to autonomous action. Urgent steps are necessary as the lack of cohesive EU defense strategy has negatively impacted our security. We welcome cooperation with third countries based on mutual respect of our values, including international law, the rule of law, and human rights. Cyprus is committed to actively participating in the development of European defense, leveraging EU opportunities to maximize our contributions. We believe the advancement of European defense will positively affect to the entire of EU, including Cyprus, which has faced occupation for 50 years. Thank you.
Dziękuję. Dimitar Gardev, Bulgaria.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, calling our policy for underline diversity and identity. I'll continue on Bulgarian. Европейската отбрана е изключително важно и ново начинание за
An extremely important and new enterprise for the European Union. Let me say that European defense differs from the concept of European army. There is no EU army like there isn't a NATO army. If we speak about EU army, we must change the EU treaty to a federation. This issue is very important of military industry, military communication means infrastructure. The consensus issue extremely important. It must remain when making decisions about war and peace and enlargement. Also, cohesion policy must remain in place, and we must develop the regions, because only strong regions and a strong Europe can provide strong defense.
Estonia. He is absent. Next one, please. Jan Maciv, Slovenia.
Thank you, Chair. If we want Europe to be taken seriously as one of the world's main military power, we must make revolutionary changes in defense posture. Europe must be able to defend itself and must also be able to assert its power and its policies in the areas of interest. It would therefore be the reasonable idea, before we headless spend 800 billion euros, to prepare a European defense strategy. Otherwise, the idea of strengthening defense will turn into a European fraud and corruption story, where individual countries will compete to get European funds and spending them on anything else rather than raising lethal military power. We are already witnessing statements by some governments in order to justify higher defense spendings to the citizens that they will invest this money for education, hospitals, infrastructure, and most of all, equipment for dual use. In short, for everything else, just for real military power not. It is up to us to realize our responsibility, and by that we can use to defend ourselves against potential aggression, or we will be a sitting duck.
Liliana Reis, Portugalia.
First of all, I would like to thank the Polish government for the excellent organization of this conference. Indeed, if there is any member state that has shown us the way forward in securing Europe and deterring enemies from attacking us, it has been Poland. Now it's time to talk about the development of military capabilities, and now, I hope, is not too late. Ukraine, which has fought for us, for our freedom, has also given 3 years to invest in defense. And we did little or nothing, in addition to putting our level of ambition on paper, as always. We therefore need to get public and private sectors, such as our universities and our factories, working together to the European defense technological and industrial base. We must be able to mobilize our societies to implement all instruments of Rearm Europe. The Minister report and white paper for European defense readiness point out, let's do this, and let's do it together and more united than ever.
Pino Bicelli, Italy.
Pino Bicelli, Italy.
Grazie. Dobbiamo distinguere tra i bisogni immediati legati alla difesa dell'Ucraina, dove è necessario continuare a sostenere l'Ucraina per tutto il tempo necessario. Poi bisogna definire invece una strategia a lungo termine di difesa dell'Europa. Il libro bianco è sicuramente il primo passo verso una difesa comune. Difendere l'Europa non vuol dire solo difendere dei confini, ma vuol dire difendere la cultura, quella che è la base di tutto il mondo occidentale, anche quella degli Stati Uniti.
Defending the borders, but also the defending of culture that is shared by Europe and the United States, which is worth emphasizing within the NATO. We have to build our own defense as we take more responsibility for this. As we do it, we have to simplify systems in industry, remove red tape, and improve our industrial potential to create a true defense market, and we need to drastically reduce our dependence on non-European countries. This is difficult to imagine if we don't feel that this is our own home.
Thank you.
Johan Dickman,
we
Belgium.
heard yesterday from several speakers that the US is not interested in Europe anymore. That's a fact, and the so-called China pivot started already during the Obama administration. The Russian aggression in Ukraine is a wake-up call. The Polish Minister of Defense stated yesterday that Europeans will stick to their national armies for all kinds of reasons. So the question is how to organize a strong and effective European defense architecture. It is not realistic to organize a unified European army on its own. The logical thing to do would be organizing Europe defense as a strong NATO component. Europe, especially Western Europe, took their freedom for granted. Ukraine is now defending our borders. From now on, defending our European borders will be crucial, not only to defend Europe from illegal migration, but also to draw a line and prevent future aggression.
Rashid Temal, Francia. Absent. Next one, Martin Stakis, Europarlament.
Thank you, Chair. And one of the topics raised today is European Union armed forces. I just want to point out that European has efficient functioning common defense mechanism, and that's NATO. And we don't need to create new format, but rather make the existing one even more efficient, effective, and rely more on those allies we can trust. And we already have successful examples, and here I must mention Division North. Latvia began developing together with Denmark 8 years ago. It consists of 5 trained, well-equipped brigades from Latvia, Denmark, and 1 NATO brigade led by Canada, and they are already conducting joint exercises within the NATO network and can serve an excellent example of how countries should cooperate. So the most important point I want to emphasize is that creation of new armies, it's a long-term process. It involves high complex decision-making and logistic mechanism. 10 years is the minimum time frame required to establish it. Do we have this time? No, I don't think so. Thank you.
Rafael Damian Lemus.
Gracias.
España.
Spain.
Gracias, presidente. Voy a hablar en español. Ayer el presidente Trump dejó caer la posibilidad de poner aranceles a las farmacéuticas con el objetivo de poseer una segura industria farmacéutica ante un posible conflicto militar.
We heard
No hay
about
guerra
tariffs
arancelaria.
on
Hay una
pharmaceutical
economía de preguerra
products
en ciernes. Habrá que
yesterday.
invertir en gasto
And
militar, luchar contra las ciberamenazas.
there is no
Concienciar a la
tariff
población, pero si no
war.
somos capaces de aislar
We have to
a la ultraderecha
fight
colaboracionista con
against
Putin y
such
con Trump
conduct.
dentro de la Unión Europea, de muy poco habrá
If
servido
we
todo el
cannot
esfuerzo
stop
que hagamos.
Ukraine,
Hay que aislar a los colaboracionistas con Putin de su capacidad de
if we can't
condicionamiento e
stop
influencia
Putin
dentro de
and
nuestras
Trump
democracias. Y
and the
para ello,
right
los
wing,
estados
we
deben
will
llevar a cabo mecanismos
not
disuasorios para que la
succeed.
población los reduzca a
Countries
partidos
have to put in
insignificantes.
or
Europa
implement
es fruto de la
deterrence
supervivencia de miles de
systems in
generaciones
order to
que han sabido transmitir sobre su descendencia
stop
un profundo y arraigado instinto de resistencia y supervivencia.
ultra-right
Y lo está
movements.
sufriendo
We
en la
have
actualidad en
been
Ucrania. Pero
successful
los Steve
for many
Bannon,
years,
los
and
Elon
Putin knows
Musk y
that.
los MAGA lo desconocen. Habrá que hacérselo saber. Nada más.
Today, MAGA and Musk may not know that, actually, so we have to demonstrate it. Nicolas Pascual de la Parte Europe.
Reality, which is the capability, defense capability for Europe. We cannot talk about European army yet, because that means first to have a common European government, a European Parliament, and a European independent judiciary. We're still not there. For the time being, we have to share and to pull together capabilities in order to have the way to defend ourselves as to have strategic autonomy. That will require at least 4 or 5 years, as von der Leyen has recognized. That's why we cannot afford that the Americans leave Europe before this time or leave NATO. We need them for the next 4 or 5 years, their presence here, the strategic enablers, the logistical capabilities, and the technological and industrial support. The European Union has to move quickly, but has to recognize that we need not only more money, but also to integrate our structures, our command and control, and our capability to respond. That's why I agree with those who think that for the time being we need to reinforce our NATO capabilities in order to be able to have a credible deterrence against Putin. Thank you very much.
Antonio Pereira, Portugal.
Dear members, it would be unnecessary to point out the immensity of the challenges ahead, or indeed the pertinence of the debates we are having here. Whether we like it or not, the world order has changed and continues to change by the day, when not by the hour. A new, pluricentric, chaotic and unstable global order has taken its place. Our duty is to look at these trends realistically and to make sure that Europe too is given a seat at the table of the alters to come. For that, Europe must be strong, politically, economically and offensively. We must work together in what is practically and immediately achievable instead of wasting our time with fantasies. I'm convinced that this is the direction we must take. Time is of the essence. Thank you very much.
Bertrand Bowie, Francia.
Mesdames et messieurs, j'entends parler de dissuasion, alors posons-nous la question. La France et la
Ladies and
Grande-Bretagne
gentlemen, let's
disposent
ask a
de l'arme
question. France
nucléaire.
and the UK
Le nouveau contexte
have
géopolitique nous
nuclear
oblige à repenser la
weapons.
doctrine
The
nucléaire,
new
notamment dans le cas où
geopolitical
les États-Unis viendraient à retirer
context
leur parapluie.
forces a
L'Europe serait-elle
redefinition
prête
of
à
a
assurer
nuclear
seule sa dissuasion stratégique
conflict
face aux menaces existentielles,
doctrine.
face à la Russie? Faut-il
If
envisager que
the
d'autres
US
pays au sein de l'Union
withdraws,
européenne
we have
puissent
to
se doter des
imagine
moyens
a
nucléaires au
situation
risque de
where
heurter
other
les traités de
countries in Europe
non-prolifération?
should perhaps
Ou
have
devons-nous
nuclear
renforcer nos
capabilities,
capacités
which would
afin
be
d'étendre notre
against
protection au reste de l'Europe?
non-proliferation
Finalement, l'autonomie
treaties.
stratégique européenne peut-elle
Having
être
said that,
crédible
we
sans une
need
réflexion
to defend the entire Europe, but can we really do it without taking on board nuclear concepts? Kostas Papadakis, European Parliament.
In Ukraine and the genocide of the Palestinian people by Israel is aimed at the redivision of the markets and the control of natural resources in a confrontation between the EU and the Russian or Chinese monopolies. At the same time, the contradictions in the Euro-Atlantic camp between the US and EU are intensifying. The EU is engaged in a frantic arms race with or without NATO, which will be paid by the people independently if there will be a Euro army or not. The pretext of the EU and Ukraine are falling apart, while the Turkish government is declared its strategic partner, the occupation of Cyprus, and the casus belli against Greece continue, the mayor Imamoglu is imprisoned, and the popular protests are repressed. The peoples should not become cannon fodder for EU's and government's interests, but to forge an independent path for their own interests.
Proszę Inna Koseru, Moldavia.
Distinguished colleagues, Russia's aggression against Ukraine has shaken the foundations of the international order and demonstrated that peace and stability cannot be taken for granted. Europe's security has long been closely linked to its strategic alliances, but today we're discussing the creation of a European Union armed forces. This should be seen as a pragmatic response to an increasingly unpredictable security environment. For the Republic of Moldova, a stronger Europe also means a safer region. We feel firsthand the danger of instability generated by frozen conflicts, energy manipulation, and disinformation campaigns. A more robust European defense system would not only protect the member states, but also its strategic partners, offering them a real perspective of security and stability. Security is not only a right, but also a responsibility. Europe must be prepared, and the future of our security depends on the decisions we take today. Dziękuję bardzo.
Fuat Oktay, Turcja.
Fuat Oktay, Turkey.
The Ukraine-Russia war has marked a major shift in European security dynamics. It has reshaped the defense and security architecture of Europe and brought the issue of European security and defense to the fore. Creating a unified European Union armed force and strengthening NATO and national military capabilities have been discussed as two alternative options in this regard. We observe EU steps towards building its own military, particularly through the European Defence Fund and initiatives like the Permanent Structured Cooperation, PESCO. However, there are still certain challenges to the establishment of a common security framework. Military capacities and interoperability remain limited compared to that of NATO. Another major weakness in such endeavors can be the adoption of a limited and exclusive approach. We hope that the recent shift in approach marks the beginning of a more inclusive and constructive relationship between the EU and Turkey. Rather than the accusations towards Turkey, I guess we should be looking into the ways to come together and strengthen the relations between the two, between Turkey and EU indeed. Being NATO's second largest army, located in a critical geostrategic area, having extensive military experience and a highly advanced defense industry, Turkey can present substantial opportunities and contributions for the EU's security efforts. Thank you.
Titus Corlatean.
Titus Corlatean, Romania.
Colleagues, I propose you a complementary perspective to our current discussion on defense and security. That means the democratic security. And I want to remind you that in March 2014, after the illegal annexation of Crimea, the EU foreign ministers condemned Russia for the crime of aggression. In March 22, the Council of Europe expelled Russia for the same crime of aggression committed against Ukraine and started a work to what was missing from our international society. That means a special jurisdiction for punishing and judging the crime of aggression. The enlarged partial agreement of the Council of Europe with Ukraine was the legal solution identified. And quite recently, the experts already almost finished the draft text and the statute of the jurisdiction, and I invite you to support the adoption in the future of the Council of Europe member states of this enlarged partial agreement. Why enlarged? Because it will be opened also for the non-EU states, and this will be important for at least two reasons. First of all, to confirm the fact that we remain committed to our fundamental democratic values and to the fundamental international principles. And secondly, to launch the signal that sometimes in the future, if there will be someone else interested to use the same precedent to use the force and to illegally annex territories, there will be a solution jurisdiction. So us, at least us, the Europeans, we can do it.
Please.
Thank you.
Nasib Nako, Albania. Absent. Please, Hulusi Akar, Turkey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And dear colleagues, we believe that the divided approach undermines the NATO's effectiveness and the collective defense capability. As the EU and the NATO share strategic interests, and most member states, deepening cooperation between the two organizations would be more feasible and pragmatic. Both organizations could also enhance collaboration on joint military exercises, intelligence sharing, development of the defense technologies, and building the capacities of member states. This would strengthen both organizations and prevent the problem of the duplication. Dear colleagues, also I feel obliged to state that Netanyahu's relentless campaign to annihilate the Palestinian people, including the thousands of their children, and its denial of the basic human dignity continue to test the credibility of the discourse of values. Selective morality is also a threat to humanity. We are always ready to answer all allegations, but not for the false and impolite and the irrelevant ones. Thank you.
Dragan Markovic, Serbia.
Chairman, in the very beginning, I want to thank the hosts for your hospitality and conference that was well organized, and to remind you that 26 years ago, contrary to the UN security resolution, my country was bombed. In that case, there was violation of international law and the UN Charter. International law cannot be applied selectively, and compliance with it is a precondition for peace. And precisely those double standards in the implementation of fundamental human rights have led to the current geopolitical crisis in the world. In that context, I not mention the illegal bombing of Serbia or the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. The solution to any conflict is negotiations. Today, there are negotiations between the US and Russia and the delegation of Ukraine, sitting at different tables, admittedly, but they are conducting negotiations on terminating the conflict in the territory of the Ukraine. They should be provided support in their efforts, trusting that a lasting peace will be achieved. Thank you.
Proszę, Salomia Bobrowska, Ukraina.
Yes, dear colleagues, I just want to call to make the right historical decision towards not only Ukraine, but your own security and defense. I think J.D. Vance was very clear during the Munich conference when he said that the biggest threat is going not only from China and Russia, but from the inside of the Europe. And I think they are giving a lesson to you that you have to pay attention and to even rewrite the white paper on defense 2030. Because if you think that we will keep fighting for the 6 years, I think you are very optimistic. And I think you are very optimistic if you think that Russia will wait the 6 years to again threatening you somehow on the Nordic or western flanks of Russia. And I think, again, the eastern flank of Europe knows this clearly, and it's obvious what they're gonna do at the end if they finish with Ukraine. Again, my request for you is to not only to increase the defense spendings, train your youth, raise your reserve in military. That has to be your very basic things you have to explain to your society and to raise awareness about that you've already for the last 80 years. But Russia wasn't never punished, and instead of Nazism and fascism, now we have the blooming of Russism, and that's the very clear things we see, and we have to finally accept in this reality. Thank you.
Drilon Gashi, Kosovo.
Szanowni Panie Przewodniczący Różański, dear Chairwoman Strack-Zimmerman, honorable colleagues. It is always a privilege for the Republic of Kosovo to be represented at critical forums like this one on defense and security. I thank our Polish hosts, respectable chairpersons, for Poland's leadership on security in Europe and beyond, particularly on Ukraine. Ours is perhaps a small voice, but is a voice of unconditional support for a Ukraine that is free, whole, and at peace. Yesterday, 26 years ago, very many of the countries in this hall took the difficult but right decision to carry out a NATO humanitarian intervention against the Milosevic regime of Yugoslavia and in defense of the Kosovar Albanian population. Many resolutions were mentioned here, but I'll point to resolutions 1160, 1199, and 1203 of the UN that were violated by Serbia during its wars across the Balkans. So I hope for that same resolve today and the similar strength to find the support for our partners in Ukraine and in defense of Ukraine. Colleagues, today Kosovo spends 2% of our GDP on defense, is focused on enhancing capabilities and capacities in partnership with allies in NATO, and for the further development of defense production, including in partnership recently with Croatia and Albania. Lastly, it's our hope and commitment to achieve mutual recognition and full normalization of relations with Serbia. We hope to look forward to a Kosovo and a Western Balkans a part of the European Union and NATO. Thank you, dziękuję bardzo, and Slava Ukraini.
Proszę, Paweł Bartoszek, Islandia.
Mr. Chairman, what ways are there to counter Russian agenda? How can you fight against the external forces that want to tear Europe apart? Well, we can do the opposite of what they want. We can support further European integration, and the public support for that has been rising if you look at the polls and the election results in many European countries. My country, Iceland, will hold the referendum of the future of the accession talks with the EU by the year 2027. That is a decision that will be decided by our voters and our nation. But the problem is that the external forces that want to tear Europe apart, they like to move fast. They like to think in days. But European integration is a process that's thought of in decades, and that can be a problem. But we have shown that we can move fast too. Last NATO expansion was fast. We seized the moment, we took the enemy by surprise. That was good, and we can learn from that.
Bardzo proszę, Dunia Simonowicz-Bratic.
Dunia Simonowicz-Bratic.
Thank you. I must react on your discretion right that you gave to the representatives from so-called state Kosovo, because this was against procedure. Representatives from Kosovo that are not MPs had no right to speak, and this is really unacceptable. They are territory, not state. This is violation of international law that you all appeal here 2 days that we are listening. Thank you.
For the last intervention, thank you very much for all your opinions and questions. Now I would like to give the floor back to our keynote speakers. The first to take the floor would be Mr. Paweł Zalewski.
Dear colleagues, thank you very much for this very interesting discussion, and thank you very much for your commitment to strengthen security and capabilities, defense capabilities of Europe. Maybe let me express two comments, short comments. First, pragmatism. I would like to refer to this word which was used by many of you, and I fully share this approach. And when we understand who is a potential enemy, what he prepares for, in which time framework, we understand which are the pragmatic solutions to defend Europe. Then, and that is something extremely important for us here in Poland, being threatened by Russia. We absolutely understand that threats vis-à-vis Europe, towards Europe, comes from different directions, also from the south. And we believe in solidarity. Solidarity is the word which has a sense for us in Poland, you know it. So we believe in solidarity. We are ready for common to participate in common defense, in common support in any other areas. And with regard to this issue, I would like to raise your attention to one important issue, that Russia, or the Russian threat, is important in eastern flank of Europe. But if you look at what is going on, not only in Syria, but also in Libya, you can recognize the same threat which is present here in eastern part of Europe. So, unfortunately, Russia threatens us not only from the east, but also from the south. Thank you, and have a good time in Poland, in Warsaw. Thank you.
Keynote speaker, Mr. Timo Pesonen. The floor is yours.
Can you hear me now? Thank you. I fully agree with Mr. State Secretary that the pragmatism, I think, should be the guiding principle. I think we have no time for ideological or teleological discussions. We need to act now and get our act together. And what our Ukrainian friend said at the very end, that we don't have time to wait until 2030. I think we are all fully aware of it. So we have to start now, and that's what we are doing. So I think that, the sense of urgency, solidarity, pragmatism, and the spirit that we are in this together, including our friends from UK, Norway, Iceland, and the so-called enlargement countries, is of utmost importance. And as State Secretary said, the Russian threat is imminent, and it's conventional, it's physical in our borders here in the northeast, but it's also present in Mediterranean, in the Atlantic, everywhere. They are operating in Africa, they are operating against us. Their objective is the destruction of the European Union and destruction of our way of life and our rule-based societies. So I also urge for urgency, and I think it was a Maltese colleague who rightly said that the aggressor doesn't care about talk, only force, and I think this is true. And to my friend Mr. Gahler, I say as a comment that indeed we are in this together with all the European actors and institutions. We have no room for any turf fights or any kind of ego boost competitions with the military staff, with EDA, which is a very important partner, and of course with our NATO allies. Thank you very much.
Minister, now closing remarks of our keynote speaker, Ivana. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Obviously, we highly appreciate a lot of goodwill that is present in this hall and among your nations. But let me be brutally honest with you, dear colleagues. The war has not been going on for 3 years. It has been ongoing for 11 years, when little green men have ended up in our Crimean Peninsula, and we were protected by a sheet of paper that we received as a result of our giving up of the third biggest arsenal of nuclear weapons in the world. So since then, I think there were quite a few calls for awakening across Europe. And one of the last ones right now is the earthquake of the geopolitical changes of the approaches in the United States. I think time is really ticking. Ukraine has given a lot of time to take the decision. If you are looking for resources how to help Ukraine right now, seize the Russian frozen assets. Do not be afraid. The money is right there to right now back Ukraine with all the possible military equipment so that we can together project the capability and strength That is the only language that Russian Federation does understand. And in the meantime, in order for your children to have the possibility to pursue their dreams, to have great education, to be enjoying their lives with freedoms that you have just got, that you are taking for granted. For that to happen, invest in your security and in your defense now, because every single euro that you are going to invest today in your defense will actually produce a bright and secure future for your children. Thank you.
Thank you, Ivana. Firstly, please accept my apologies for my pronunciation, because your name and first name sometimes was for me a little difficult. Dziękuję bardzo za te głosy i stanowiska, które zostały przedstawione.
Interventions and positions that have been presented. I think that issues that pertain to military security of Europe will be continued to be discussed, and your interventions will contribute to working out the best possible position thanks to which Europeans will feel safe. And let me wrap this up by telling you that the Kosovo delegation
swojej reprezentacji parlamentarnej.
Does not have a parliamentary representation here, but it's represented by the head of the Kosovo mission in Poland, Mr. Pan, who is on the list of the participants, and that's why we considered it correct
delegacja Kosowa mogła zabrać głos
for the
na naszej
Kosovan delegation to be able to express its opinion at this conference through his person, especially that his country was mentioned in the presentations of some of the delegations yesterday. Let me thank you for your participation. Let me thank you for being here. And let's now take a 15-minute coffee break. Thank you.
Tak.
Właśnie myślę, że pora na gong.
Ale mamy legislacyjny, gdzie to ale mi się to podoba.
Mamy, znaczy, możesz tam zostawić, ale mam coś listę samochodów. Chciałem tylko zauważyć, że na nowo i tak będzie współufane.
Nie szkodzi, ale jest takie ze skrótami krajów, które są problematyczne. Na przykład Estonia w życiu bym nie wpadła na to, że ma ma 2
Ja bym wcześniej powiedział, że to jest Szwajcaria. Ale to Szwajcarii nie ma. Nie rozwiązało się sam. To powinni według prawa
Szef reprezentacji, no bo przecież nie mamy relacji, nie? Mamy takiego konsulanta od niedawna dopiero, no i poznaliśmy, ale nie mamy relacji z panem.
Do przesłania.
Agresor, no to nie, pamiętajmy, że nie tylko jest jeden agresor, nie jeden agresor jest.
Zaatakują.
No, także generalnie rzecz biorąc, ja
nie ma czegoś takiego, tak, dokładnie, prowincji. A serwowie się tutaj szczególnie z policjami.
no serwowie chcieliśmy Artur, jest takie wyjaśnienie.
Panie Struś!
Takie wyjaśnienie, że wprawdzie nie ma tu reprezentanta Parlamentu Kosowa, ale ten reprezentant Kosowa jakby bierze udział dla podkreślenia, że w kraju Bałkanów Zachodnich uczestnicza w tej konferencji. Ja już raz uwieczniłam.
A teraz się odwróćcie.
Czekaj, bo mam chwilę.
Czekaj.
Wszech wspaniały, sekretarz D'Artagnan.
Gdzie ten Artur poszedł? Artur?
Artur nie liczy.
A tam drugi fotograf.
Artur, no słuchaj, Artur, to joint statement, które jest wydrukowane, moim zdaniem Karolina powinna to teraz w czasie tej sesji rozdawać na zasadzie to joint statement, wyłożyć na recepcji,
do recepcji dajemy, nie rozdajemy, natomiast wysyłamy link.
To trzeba powiedzieć, żeby dziewczyny wyłożyły to do recepcji.
One już wiedzą.
One już wiedzą, dobra. Nie wiedziałam, czy to jest... Okej, teraz miał rozłożyć, dobra. Czyli nie rozdajemy delegacji.
Mam
Ale czekajcie, Olo idzie, to Olo nam zrobi.
O, już sekundę.
Chodź tutaj. Tak, będzie to się może bardzo przydać. Wprawdzie Ola prosiła Jacka. Tak, Ola wszystko wie. Macie, to nie będzie nie professional.
Biegnij, szybko. Nie za późno.
Chodź, Paweł. Chodź, Paweł. Chodź. O, absolutnie. Cudownie, tak? I potem nie. Tak, ja wszystko wiem, więc tam szybko kawę, dziękuję. Dzwoni dzwonek. To jest twoje, Jacek. Wszystkie. Powiedz, że 24 osoby mamy tylko?
Ty nie boisz? Nam ta kartę zrobiła.
12:40. Moich 26 czy 4 nawet.
Po prostu jak prowadzą sesję.
Pomaska w Pawłu.
To za ciężka praca.
Bo nie chce, chodźcie zdjęcie sobie zrobić.
Szybko. Gdzie Kamil? Do środka. Czyli od ciebie biorę też. O.
No tak wygląda. Oni byli zgłoszeni do każdej.
Jeszcze jedno.
No też później uciekłam, ale to musiałam prosić z kolei, bo i zamykający też mam, idzie przewodniczący. Słuchaj, tego nie może być cały czas. Rodzica w piśmie nie przeszkadza. A tego musi
Czy to się wyłączają?
My też trzymamy.
O, mamy przewodniczącego naszego. Najlepiej wiesz, włączyć się. Ale po raz pierwszy w życiu?
No.
Ale
Zresztą zdjęcie ze sobą. Szersza perspektywa. A ja sekretarz posiedzenia.
A ja jako wiceszef. Dla nas wszystkich.
Nie bójcie się, będzie legalnie. Włączone, tak?
Ladies and gentlemen, we start into the fourth part of our session. This session is about security in Baltic Sea region, Russian hostilities, attempts to change borders and circumvent EU sanctions. I switch my speech into Polish language. Thank you for your presence. Szanowni Państwo, temat dotyczący bezpieczeństwa w regionie Morza Bałtyckiego i również wszystkie wydarzenia, które są związane z aktywnością ze strony rosyjskiej w tym regionie nabrał szczególnego znaczenia nie tylko po wybuchu wojny Rosji przeciwko Ukrainie, ale również nabrał zupełnie innego znaczenia w momencie, kiedy partnerzy z Finlandii oraz Szwecji
Russia attacked Ukraine, but also
Paktu
all this have
Północnoatlantyckiego.
become significant as Sweden and Finland joined the NATO. Not easy process in itself, but successful. So this conference is fully attended, if you like, and we have our partners from Finland and Sweden in the room. So the Baltic Sea region has gained a whole new meaning.
Ale jest takie określenie, że stał się morzem wewnętrznym NATO. Nie jest to sprawiedliwa ocena i pewnie nasi konkurenci, szczególnie strona rosyjska, absolutnie nie podzielają tego momentu, ale jednocześnie to też pokazuje ważną rolę regionu Morza Bałtyckiego odgrywa w polityce europejskiej i również
it shows how important the region is for Europe and for Europe's security and for the transatlantic security. Russia has intensified hybrid activities against the Baltic Sea countries from Belarus. Hybrid attacks are mounted against Poland with illegal migration as a weapon. Often justified by the poor people trying to find a new home in safe
traktowanie jako narzędzie.
Europe, but they are only
Ta
treated
nielegalna
as
migracja nie jest
weapons.
tylko wymierzona
The illegal
na
migration
granicę wschodnią
is not
Polski,
only targeting the
ale
eastern
również
border of
wobec Litwy,
Poland,
Łotwy.
but also
Instrumentalizacja
those of
migracji przez
Lithuania
stronę
and
rosyjską,
Latvia,
która
the
wyraźnie jest tutaj
weaponization of
stroną
migration
zaangażowania,
by
nie tylko
Russia,
dialogu.
which is the engaged party,
Była
not only
realizowana także w
Belarus,
stosunku do
has
Finlandii i Estonii.
also been used
Należy
against Finland and
też
Estonia.
podpowiedzieć, że
One has to
to
add
nie jest
to
tylko
this
próba nielegalnego przekraczania
this is
granicy,
not
ale
just
również
about
ma to
an
charakter kampanii
illegal
dezinformacyjnej oraz
crossing of the
sabotażowych,
border.
czy
It's
też
linked
cyberataków.
with sabotage, cyber
Polska
attacks, and
jako kraj
disinformation.
członkowski
Poland,
NATO oraz
as a NATO
Unii
member
Europejskiej
and as an
realizuje
EU
szereg
member state,
zadań na rzecz bezpieczeństwa w regionie bałtyckim.
contributes to the
zabezpieczając
security
granice z
of
rosyjskim
the
obwodem
region by
królewskim,
securing the western
zabezpieczając
border
tak zwany
of
przesmyk suwalski,
the
najbardziej
EU with
oceniam
the Kaliningrad
strategów,
Oblast,
krytycznie ważny dla
and
obrony
by
Litwy,
securing
Łotwy i
the
Estonii,
Suwałki Gap,
część
which is a
naszej
critical piece of
wspólnej
land
przestrzeni,
on the borders of
zarówno Unii,
three
jak i NATO.
countries.
Również zabezpieczając polsko-białoruską granicę,
Also
która,
by
jak
securing the
powiedziałem we wstępie,
Polish-Belarusian
atakowana jest metodami
border, which is
hybrydowymi
being
oraz przy
attacked
wykorzystaniu
using hybrid
przez Moskwę oraz
methodologies.
nielegalnej migracji. Polska jest też hubem logistycznym.
Poland is
pracującym
also
na
a logistical
potrzeby obrony
hub
Ukrainy,
supporting the military effort of Ukraine.
Zabezpiecza przestrzeń powietrzną NATO regularnie.
And we
która jest
also secure the
regularnie
NATO
naruszana
airspace,
przez
which is
stronę rosyjską.
regularly violated
Również infrastruktura
by
morska,
Russia.
infrastruktura
The
krytyczna
marine
na Bałtyku jest
infrastructure,
wiemy
the
z
critical
licznych
infrastructure in the
informacji,
Baltic Sea, as we know from
naruszana i ona
public
również wymaga
communication,
naszego zabezpieczenia.
is being violated
Wszystko to wymaga
often
wysiłku ze
too,
strony
and
również polskich
that
sił zbrojnych,
needs
które są
to be
zaangażowane
secured.
zarówno w
Now that
operacje zabezpieczenia bezpieczeństwa i szczelności
means
wschodniej
a lot
granicy.
of contribution from
Ponad
the
kilka
military
tysięcy polskich żołnierzy, oprócz
of Poland,
formacji policyjnych,
the armed
więc
forces,
Straży Granicznej, polskiej policji,
Polish
jest
police,
zaangażowany w
Polish
sposób
border
stały
guards, and the
w
Polish
zabezpieczenie
army
wschodniej granicy.
are
Są
permanently
to stałe
stationed
związki,
to protect
całe
the eastern
dywizje są
border of Poland
zaangażowane
and the
akurat
eastern border
w ten
of
proces.
the EU. The
Ponadto
whole
prowadzimy
divisions
też
are deployed in order to
operację
do so.
związaną z budową tarczy wschód.
Furthermore, we are part and
Czy
parcel
też
of the
jesteśmy
Shield
zaangażowani
East
w
effort.
wzmocnienie systemu obrony powietrznej,
We are also involved
pod
in
kryptonimem
strengthening
Wschodnia
the
Zorza,
air defense
ale też szkolimy żołnierzy na terytorium naszego
effort.
państwa dla sił ukraińskich i wydaje mi się, że ten proces jest widoczny, bo to jest kilkadziesiąt tysięcy żołnierzy, którzy zostali przeszkoleni w ramach tych
several hundred thousand
wysiłków.
soldiers
Ponadto
who
są
have been trained to
prowadzone
support
również
these
operacje
initiatives.
morskie,
We are involved in
między innymi natowska
marine,
operacja
navy
Baltic
operations,
Sentry i narodowa
the Baltic Sentry
Zatoka.
operation,
W
and the
sposób
National
szczególny
Bay
chcieliśmy wyrazić ze strony polskiej swoje podziękowanie za to,
initiative,
że
and
ten głos
Poland
Polski
would like to
w
thank
zakresie konieczności stworzenia
everyone
specjalnej
for
operacji,
taking on
która
board
zabezpieczy bezpieczeństwo, w szczególności infrastruktury krytycznej,
recommendation that
w postaci tym
steps
Baltic
be
Guard,
taken
czy jak nazywamy
to
operacji,
ensure the Baltic security
jest
with the Baltic
zyskał
Guard
uznanie
or the
naszych
Baltic
partnerów,
Center. Thank you for listening to
zamierzam
us, and
podkreślić
thank you
i w sposób
for
szczególny
taking this on
podziękować
board.
za zrozumienie.
We would like to thank you so much
będzie
for
za chwilę
this.
występował w swoim wystąpieniu, będzie niewątpliwie o tym
Vice
mówił.
Admiral Krzysztof
I widzę, że
Jaworski
potwierdza
will
to, co tutaj mówię,
undoubtedly
przez
allude to this
swoje gesty.
in a moment.
Ponadto chcę podkreślić również naszą obecność
May I
polskich
also
sił zbrojnych
emphasize the presence of
na
Poland
Łotwie
and
i
Polish
Rumunii w
armed
ramach
forces
wysuniętych
in
sił
Latvia and Romania
lądowych NATO,
as
czy
part
też
of the NATO
nasz udział w ramach natowskiej
advanced
operacji Baltic Air Policing.
presence.
Sądzę, że to są
And the
ważne
NATO
fakty, o
policing
których
effort
powinniśmy
as
pamiętać,
well as
rozpoczynając
attended by us. So these are
debatę w tej
important
części.
facts that we need to remember
Zagrożenia
as we start this
w
part
regionie
of
Morza
our conference. Threats in the
Bałtyckiego
Baltic
o
Sea
charakterze
region,
hybrydowym, jak i również
which are
sabotażowym,
of
które
hybrid and
dotyczą
sabotage
w szczególności
nature,
infrastruktury krytycznej,
relate
pozwalają nam
to critical
na to,
infrastructure,
żebyśmy
mainly.
poświęcili akurat w tej części czwartej sesji,
In session 4,
części
particularly in
naszej
this
konferencji,
session,
szczególną uwagę,
we
mimo
need
że
to focus on
może
this
w ocenie
and
niektórych
give it
koleżanek i
give
kolegów
it
jest to
special
problem regionalny. Problem
attention.
regionalny, on
Whilst some
pokazuje
may
też, jakim
think that
problemem
this
możemy się
is
spotkać
a
w różnych
regional
częściach. Tym bardziej, że w poprzedniej
issue.
sesji między innymi
We
pan
see
minister
how
Zalewski był
regional
uprzejmy
issues Croatia's
To nie jest tak, że
spill over.
tylko na wschodniej flance jest obecność i to taka silna obecność wyrażona między innymi przeciwko Ukrainie, ale również siły rosyjskie są przemieszczane z Syrii, między innymi do Libii. Co też świadczy o tym, że po doświadczeniach chociażby w regionie Sahelu
in this
świadczy o
part,
tym, że to
but
nie tylko
also is moving its
wschodnia flanka
forces
jest przedmiotem zainteresowania
in
strony
the Sahel
rosyjskiej.
region. So Russia
Chciałbym
is
również podkreślić, że
in more areas
przyjęte plany
than the eastern
dotyczące
flank
tarczy wschód,
of the
które
NATO.
decyzją Polskiej Rady Ministrów
Polish
zostały
government
przyjęte w sprawie Narodowego Programu
has
Odstraszania
adopted
i
the
Obrony
National
pod
Deterrence
tytułem
and
Tarcza
Defense
Wschód, ale zostało
program
to również
called Shield
uwzględnione
East,
w ramach unijnej
and it's included in the EU
decyzji w ramach Białej Księgi. Jest to
decision
podkreślone, że
to publish the
Tarcza
White
Wschód w uzgodnieniu
paper,
z
the White
sojusznikami,
paper,
w
the
szczególności zaś z Litwą, Łotwą,
East,
Estonią,
the Shield East
będzie tym
is,
elementem, który będzie
after
łącznie
consultations
z
with
budową
Lithuania,
bałtyckiej
Latvia and
obrony
Estonia will become part
niezmiernie ważny i skoordynuje w ten
a
sposób,
very
stworzy
important
osłonę
part of
zarówno
the
dla NATO, jak i
Eastern
Unii przed agresją
defense
ze
and will
wschodu.
create a
Oczywiście wszystko to
protection
wiąże się
shield
z środkami
from
finansowymi, które muszą
threats
być położone.
against the
Dla
East,
tylko
from
dla
the
informacji
East.
koleżanek i kolegów chciałbym
Obviously, this
przekazać,
needs to
że
be supported by
koszty szacowane przez stronę
investment
polską to
and
jest 10
expenditures.
miliardów
The
złotych, to jest
estimated
około
cost of
2,5 miliarda
for Poland is
euro na ten
2.5
cel
billion euros.
niezbędny. Oczywiście to jest
So
szacunek,
Poland
a
has
koszty
earmarked
rzeczywiste
this
pokaże
amount,
stan
and this is the estimate.
realizacji.
So we will have
W ramach
to
NATO
see how
jest
it goes
prowadzona, jak już
when it
powiedziałem,
comes to
operacja
how much actually
Baltic Sentry.
will have to
Ona
be
rozpoczęła
spent.
się w styczniu
Baltic
bieżącego
Sentry
roku.
started
Jest to
in
wielodomowa operacja w ramach
January
sojuszniczych działań
this year. It's a
i tej
multifaceted
wzmocnionej czujności.
approach.
I to są te
enhanced
najważniejsze elementy,
vigilance
które niewątpliwie powinniśmy
is part and parcel of
zauważyć,
this. So these are the
dyskutując w dniu
key
dzisiejszym w ramach tej konferencji.
components and building
Chciałbym
blocks of the security
powiedzieć,
of
że
the region.
naszym
May
głównym
I
mówcą
now announce
tej
that our
sesji
keynote
jest
speaker
pan admirał
is
Krzysztof
Vice Admiral
Jaworski,
Krzysztof
dowódca
Jaworski,
Centrum Operacji
Commander of
Morskich,
Maritime Operations Center,
komponentu morskiego.
Maritime
W związku
Component
z tym,
Commander.
panie admirale,
And
oddaję panu głos,
Vice Admiral,
zapraszając
the floor
tutaj do zabrania
is
głosu.
yours.
Dzień dobry. Good morning. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. First, let me thank you for the invitation to attend this event. It's a great honor for me to speak today in front of such a distinguished audience and have unique opportunity to present current security situation in the Baltic Sea region and Polish response to counter the threat. The European Parliament's resolution of 12 September 2013 on the maritime dimension of the common security and defense policy contains a list of critical maritime zones, i.e., de facto waters of vital importance for the European Union. According to the above-mentioned resolution, the Baltic Sea has been identified as the main communication route for many countries. A number of factors affecting maritime security in the region were listed, including political stability of the area, issues related to safeguarding the position of linguistic minorities in the Baltic states, energy transfer, critical maritime infrastructure, intensive commercial shipping, and last but not least, chemical weapons sunk after the end of both wars. Let's start with some current threat. The security situation in the Baltic Sea region is shaped by the actions of the Russian Federation, and this applies both to those currently carried out as part of operations below the threshold of war, I mean hybrid information, etc., as well as potentially posed by the Russian armed forces deployed in the Baltic Sea region or maybe moved to this region. In terms of international law, the Baltic Sea region is well regulated. However, the Russian Federation may seek to change the state of affairs by taking advantage of a number of opportunities created by the tools used in hybrid warfare and information activities. In the case of a confrontation with NATO in the future, it cannot be ruled out that Russia will use scenarios of action referring to both the seizure of Crimea in 2014 and the illegal invasion of Ukraine in 2022. In the first case, one should expect high-intensity activities carried out in the information environment and in the domain of cyberspace, as well as the use of irregular forces at the outbreak of proxy warfare. The main military tool to secure the interests of Russian Federation in the Baltic Sea region is the Baltic Fleet. The operational forces include not only naval forces, but also separate components of other branches of the armed forces and independent branches of other services. All these forces in the Baltic Sea region are operating on the basis of two groups of forces, one in the Bay of Gdańsk and other in the Gulf of Finland. In both areas, Russian forces are creating so-called anti-access area denial zones, understood as areas where the enemy's moving forces are closely monitored and, if necessary, destroyed by using hostile missile systems. In addition to naval forces in the Kaliningrad district area, the forces of 11th Army Corps, the core of which is the 18th Mechanized Division, as well as aircrafts, and air defense forces and coastal troops are deployed. These forces have a wide arsenal of missile armaments, including both ballistic and cruise missiles. The means of fires at the disposal of the Russian troops in the district may destroy targets at distance ranging from several kilometers to 500 kilometers, and even 1,000 kilometers using cruise missiles. These forces conduct operations in the Baltic region under the cover of an umbrella created by the air component and the land-based air defense component, as well as under the cover of activities in the information environment. Recently, the Baltic Sea has experienced an upsurge in global navigation satellite systems, GNSS, jamming incidents. In maritime shipping, satellite navigation is a primary sensor to determine position and timing. Also, other tools may be used in case of satellite systems fail. However, ships have become increasingly dependent on electronic positioning, namely automatic identification system, electronic charts, radars. All of those means need accurate position and time data. Global navigation satellite systems, including GPS, GLONASS, Galileo, and recent Chinese Beidou, are essential positioning systems for today's maritime navigation. However, satellite systems are vulnerable to jamming and spoofing, which can have serious consequences for maritime operations. The Baltic Sea is a vital area for international trade, with thousands of ships navigating its waters annually. The reliance on satellite systems for accurate positioning and timing data makes this area susceptible to disruptions caused by jamming and spoofing, especially when we are considering autonomous unmanned systems in the future. The second half of 2024 saw a significant increase of electronic warfare activities in the Baltic Sea, particularly involving global navigation satellite system and indirectly automatic navigation system, automatic identification system, spoofing. These activities pose a significant threat to maritime navigation, affecting mainly commercial operations, GSM spoofing in the transmission of interference signals that imitate the global navigation system signals. The aim is to deceive global navigation system receivers in such a way that incorrect position information is the result. Distorted position not only does confuse the crew of the ship, but also poses an obstacle while building maritime picture. Observations that were made highlighted the range of spoofing signals. In our assessment, these deceive the GNSS receivers in a distance of approximately 10 nautical miles from Bałtysk naval base. Doubts have arisen whether jamming and spoofing were a spillover effect or a deliberate attack. The hypothesis that Russian efforts are aimed to prevent GPS-guided drone attacks on its own forces and key installations, like power station, cannot be excluded. However, it will not justify the perpetrator of being reckless about the collateral damage it was causing through electronic warfare operation. And finally, regardless the intention, it still enables Russia to study how NATO countries respond to such a threat. The increase of GPS and AIS jamming incident has significant implications for commercial maritime traffic in the Baltic Sea, namely navigation disruptions, operation delays, increased insurance costs, and supply chain impact. In the light of Russian Federation aggression against Ukraine and growing threat to critical underwater infrastructure related to Nord Stream and Nord Stream 2 explosion in September 2022, Polish Navy or Polish Armed Forces has launched Zatoka operation. Zatoka is in Polish nickname. The operation has been developed in order to increase national energetic system safety level as well as to enhance readiness to robust reaction on any threats against critical maritime infrastructure. Operation Zatoka is being conducted based on concept approved by Polish Minister of Defense. The operation is carried out by several units of the Navy. In addition, the operation is supported by Navy Aviation, Special Forces, Maritime Branch of Border Guard, and Maritime National Authority bodies. Just as an example, in January 25, more than 30 patrols were carried out at sea, protecting our harbors, cables, pipes, and oil rigs. Due to increase in the number of incidents resulting in damage to pipelines, power and telecommunication cables, and the increase in the threat to maritime infrastructure, in the fourth quarter of 2024, in the Baltic Sea region, the Alliance has decided to carry out the operations of NATO naval forces and allied nations, so-called Enhanced Vigilance Activity Baltic Sentry 25. The purpose of these activities conducted by Joint Force Command Bronsum and the Command Task Force Baltic is to demonstrate NATO's ability to strengthen situation awareness, monitor and deter potential adversaries threatening the security or critical maritime infrastructure by demonstrating strength and synchronizing multi-domain allied activities. In order to achieve synergies, these tasks carried out under Operation Zatoka are coordinated with the activities under Enhanced Vigilance Activity Baltic Sentry on the basis of associated support. The Russian military invasion on Ukraine in 2022 led to a radical change in the threat perception. The accession of Finland and Sweden to NATO, respectively in April 2023 and March 2024, increased the alliance's ability to conduct collective defense mission in the Baltic Sea region. The values from the enlargement are profoundly positive, including strengthening in the northern flank of NATO and conducting collective defense missions in the region. Thanks to this enlargement, the strategically located Åland Island at Gotland became NATO's assets, enabling the control of airspace and sea lines in the region. As a result, alliance capability to deter Russia has increased. Since Finland and Sweden accession to NATO, the narrative around the Baltic Sea security highlighted the increase of the security circumstances in the Baltic Sea region, calling Baltic Sea as a NATO sea. Today, 8 of 9 countries bordering the Baltic Sea are alliance members, with Russia the only exception. However, Russian activity in the Baltic shows that NATO members need to remain vigilant and even strengthen their defense. For last decades, the Baltic Sea has become increasingly crowded with an important shipping route with high volumes of cargo traffic. It is also the location of important energy and telecommunications infrastructure for several countries, including offshore wind farms, gas pipes, and Ardent Sea communication and energy cables. What Sweden and Finland brought to NATO? Sweden possesses high-capable military forces with a cutting-edge technology, including 4th-generation Gripen fighter and Gotland-class attack submarines powered by air-independent propulsion system. Finland, its military capabilities are just one out of several reasons why Finnish membership is significant. Another, equally influential, is the fact that by joining Allied, narrative has changed. The whole regional dynamic also has changed in terms of the ability to reinforce and defend the Baltic Sea from Russian aggression. Moreover, Sweden and Finnish joining the alliance created operational dilemma for Russia. These developments have many positives from NATO perspective. Troops movement are able to easier and faster reach Allied territory. The Baltic Sea itself is much easier to control. On the other hand, the Baltic remains crucial importance for Russia too. Ports like St. Petersburg and Primorsk are very important for Russia oil export. Without easy accessible Baltic seaports, Russia cargo would travel significantly longer around Norway and Finland. The Baltic Sea also makes matter to Russian military. The Kaliningrad exclave is home base to the Baltic Fleet. It is also important transport hub, being Russian the only Baltic port which remains ice-free year-round. The current geopolitical situation in the region creates for opponent operational dilemma in terms of the relative balance of forces in the area. Depletion of existing forces now is confronted with a NATO controlling the Baltic Sea, an isolated Kaliningrad, and extended border with NATO. As part of the process of adopting NATO's command structure since 2017, the alliance has committed its members to establishing permanent high-level tactical naval commands. At the very beginning of the process, Poland declared its accession to the function of the Regional Naval Command. As a result of adopting NATO's command structure to the new requirements, on the 1st of October 2024, the German Navy took over the function of Tactical Level Maritime Command of the Commander Task Force Baltic, and at the same time, the new command achieved readiness to implement and coordinate the alliance tasks in the assigned area of the Baltic Sea. It was agreed that the function of the regional CTF will be taken over by Poland in 2028. Like other CTFs operating in the alliance area of responsibility, the main tasks of the Baltic CTF are command of the alliance dedicated naval forces in peacetime, crisis and war, as well as planning exercise and naval operations, conducting monitoring of the Baltic Sea region. The new command provides a complete and up-to-date picture of the situation at sea. In addition, CTF Baltic plays a key role in strengthening cooperation among the navies of the Baltic countries and is a key element of NATO's tactical command structure of NATO's eastern flank. As I mentioned initially, City of Baltic was established on the basis of the German Navy, headquarters in Rostock. Operationally, it reports to NATO's Joint Naval Command, MARCOM in Northwood, UK. The City of Baltic headquarters in an international structure with, apart from Germany, includes representatives of the Baltic states of the alliance, namely Denmark, Estonia, Finland, Latvia, Lithuania, Sweden, and Polish, as well as Italy and France, the Netherlands, Norway, and the United Kingdom. The Polish Navy is represented in the City of Baltic by 9 Polish officers and non-commissioned officers, and the deputy commander of the CTF with the rank of Rear Admiral. According to the plan, as I mentioned before, in 2028, Poland will be assigned the position of commander, and City of Baltic will be created on the basis of the Polish Polmarfor Command, which during this operation in territory of Poland will constitute the main contribution of the Polish armed forces to allied commands, emphasizing our role not only in the Baltic Sea, but also in Europe and NATO. Thank you for your attention, and after the end of the session, I will be open for any question. Doesn't matter in Polish or English language. Thank you very much.
Dziękuję panie admirale. Teraz do głosu zapraszam naszego drugiego mówcę,
Let's now hear
pana
from the
Jarosława
second speaker,
Ćwieka-Karpowicza,
Jarosław
który jest
Ćwiek-Karpowicz,
dyrektorem
who is
Polskiego
the
Instytutu
director
Spraw
of the
Międzynarodowych, a więc
Polish
bardzo
Institute
kompetentną
for
osobą,
International Affairs,
która z punktu widzenia nie
and a
wojskowego,
very
ale bardziej
competent person
właśnie
who will tell us more,
naukowego
not from a military, but from a
rozpoznawczego, jeżeli chodzi o tej
scientific
strony
and research
poznawczej,
point of view.
opowie o tym, jak
And he's going to
on
talk
widzi akurat ten
about
problem.
his take
Proszę bardzo, panie
on this
doktorze.
particular problem.
Bardzo dziękuję panie przewodniczący, szanowni
Thank you
państwo.
very
Będę mówił
much,
po polsku, ale
Chair.
później jak rozumiem w czasie dyskusji
Ladies and
przejdziemy
gentlemen,
pewnie wszyscy na język
I'll
angielski
speak Polish,
i,
but
będą
when we
odpowiadał
debate,
na pytania bądź komentarze
I'll switch
w
to
tym
English
języku, ale teraz, skoro
and
znajdujemy się w polskim
I'll
parlamencie, pozwolą
respond
państwo, że będę mówił w języku polskim.
in
Mi
English,
niezwykle miło
but because we
przed tak
are
szanownym
in the Polish
gronem
Parliament,
i powiedzieć
I'll take the
kilka
liberty of
słów
speaking in
o
my
tym,
native tongue.
czego możemy spodziewać się,
Now it's
a
I'm delighted to be
jak
able to
niebezpieczne są działania Rosji
be
w
part of this
regionie Morza
meeting
Bałtyckiego
and
z punktu
to share some comments
bezpieczeństwa gospodarczego
about
i energetycznego,
the
z
threats
punktu
posed
widzenia
by
interesów, można powiedzieć,
Russia,
cywilnych dla Polski, dla
the threats
innych państw.
to the civilian sphere of Poland and other member states.
Niewątpliwie celem
A handful of
Rosji jest
observations
wymuszenie
first.
zmiany w architekturze bezpieczeństwa
The goal of Russia is
europejskiego
to change
poprzez
the
podporządkowanie sobie
security
Ukrainy,
architecture by
ale także wymuszenie strefy
subordinating
buforowej
Ukraine
na
and
obszarze państw
and
wschodniej
also by
flanki NATO.
forcing a buffer zone
Więc
in the
Rosja
eastern
próbuje realizować te cele
flank of the
poprzez
NATO.
podważenie
Russia is trying to
bezpieczeństwa
pursue the
państw NATO
goals
i
by
Unii
undermining the
Europejskiej
security
i
of
zwiększanie
European
kosztów
Union
związanych
member
z
states
jego
and
utrzymaniem.
increasing the cost of maintaining
Próbuje
such
doprowadzić
security.
do
It is
sytuacji, w
trying
której
to
część
lead to
państw
a
uzna, że nie ma innej
situation where
możliwości,
some
jak
countries
tylko
may
porozumieć
believe
się z Rosją.
that there's no other
I rozbijanie
way and there's no
spójności
better
politycznej
way
państw
than
zachodnich ma
to
osłabić ich
agree with
skuteczność
Russia and
dostawiania
have a
oporu
settlement
Rosji i ułatwić jej osiąganie celów strategicznych.
and allow it to pursue its
Morze
strategic
Bałtyckie
goals. So,
i region
in this
jest
context, the
obszarem
Baltic
nasilonej
Sea
i
and the
wrogiej
Baltic Sea
działalności
region
Rosji.
will be a target of
Nie ulega
intense
wątpliwości, że
hostile
Morze Bałtyckie
action
jest
from Russia.
jednym z ważniejszych
No doubt,
morskich szlaków
the Baltic
o
Sea
największym
is one of the
natężeniu
most
ruchu
important
statków towarowych na
maritime
świecie i przepływa przez nie około
routes
15%
for
światowego morskiego
for
transportu
trade
towarowego.
traffic,
Można powiedzieć, że
accounting
codziennie
for
na Akwenie znajduje się
15%
około
of global
2000 dużych
traffic.
statków handlowych.
2,000 large
I dla
seagoing
państw
vessels are
Unii
present in
Europejskiej
the
i
region
NATO
every
ten
day.
akweń jest
For
coraz
the
ważniejszy z
NATO
punktu
and
widzenia
for the
bezpieczeństwa
EU,
energetycznego.
this
W
sea
obszarze
is becoming a
generacji
critical water body
połączeń
in terms of critical
energetycznych
infrastructure,
istniejące kable między
the
Skandynawią
cables
a
that
Europą
connect
kontynentalną
the Nordic countries
pozwalają
and continental
lepiej
Europe,
stabilizować nasze
provide
systemy
for better stability
elektroenergetyczne, a budowane farmy
between
wiatrowe
our
na dodatkowe
electric energy
źródła
systems and the
odnawialnych
farm wind farms provide a supplementary source. The Baltic Sea is critical for Baltic seas and for Poland in terms of gas infrastructure, because this is where we accept condensed gas from the United States and other areas. And of course, we have the Baltic pipe that transfers gas from the north to the south. When it comes to the transfer of oil, the Baltic Sea is especially irreplaceable part, a black scenario, a gloomy scenario of the Baltic Sea not being available or admissible, not being available to us, where all this is disconnected. It's a truly gloomy scenario for oil, because we have no alternative. The entire crude oil that is refined in Poland, but also in East Germany, all this oil is picked up by vessels like the Mažeikiai refinery in Lithuania. It is getting oil that is sent through the Baltic, and the amount of crude oil which is processed in these refineries and the access to oil derivatives in the Baltic states can only happen because of the trading routes in the Baltic Sea. But the Baltic is key to Russia too. In terms of its energy policy. The crude oil deposits from eastern Siberia are now being tapped into as Russia sells oil and oil derivatives to Far East, and that's a handful of percent, or a dozen of percent. Then they have the Black Sea, but 60% accounts for the Baltic Sea. Russia has been investing in port infrastructure in Petersburg, apart from the naphtha port in Primorsk. They launched a Dusługa naphtha port a decade ago. So most of the oil is going from there through Baltic onwards to the destination markets. And they use the shadow fleet to do so. They are not Russian flag vessels. The Admiral has enumerated military and sabotage actions and more complicated actions from Russia that we have observed. There are 6 groups: military provocations, the jets with switched off transponders violate our airspace. GPS signal is jammed, which creates threats to both aviation and maritime traffic. The destruction of critical infrastructure, the destruction of cables, and, wind farms, or entries to harbors. Another threat is the risk of environmental disaster. Whilst the Baltic is one of the most polluted seas already, there's an enormous risk of a catastrophe happening in this Baltic, in the sea, that is included, that is related to some of the explosives and potentially chemical weapons that are lying on the seabed. And finally, there are R&D ships apparently R&D ships that travel to and fro in the Baltic Sea, making reconnaissance. In fact, NATO focuses on deterrence on full scale, but has limited abilities to respond to actions that are not preparing an attack, but are equally dangerous. Years of neglect in investing in infrastructure means that we have not enough ships and helicopters to protect this part of Europe. We do not have enough compatibility when it comes to equipment and systems used by uniformed services, not to mention the communications. Allies are trying to deter Russia by stepping up supervision of our presence in the Baltic Sea and by increasing the presence itself. And Baltic Century is part and parcel of that. Apart from the common framework for member states, we seek more collaboration in smaller groups. The countries of the region should definitely benefit from regional scenarios of responding to incidents so that we can be better at detecting such incidents, and we should be better at responding to them. We should also identify military assets that can be mobilized as Russia intensifies its reconnaissance missions and perpetrates subversion. We need to step up training for navies and coastal defense system personnel. It is absolutely essential that we should make it harder for Russia to destroy critical infrastructure and circumvent sanctions. According to the European Energy Agency, sanctions have reduced Russia's capabilities, whilst Russia had about 20 billion of euros worth of income from selling fuels every month. Before the war, now it's 17, which means that the reduction is still insufficient. It is important that the EU agrees on procedures, lawful procedures, to stop ships for inspection. The current sanctions include 150 ships. It is important that we step up the development of our joint potential and technologies so that we can detect threats to critical infrastructure. In summary, numerous cases of destructions of critical infrastructure show the high vulnerability of this asset, that shows a broader vulnerability of the region. The alliance has taken positive steps, but the full implementation takes time, and these measures are insufficient, especially if we want to maintain security and maintain or improve our economic power. Advanced bilateral and multilateral collaboration is essential among Baltic states, which I definitely encourage, and thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, Director, for this address, and thank you very much for pointing out various types of threats to critical infrastructure, and thank you for raising the topic of economic challenges to the region, but also to the entire EU. I would like to inform you that we are moving now to debate. You have registered to take the floor. Good news, we will have more time for individual interventions. And this as a result of your apparent interest in the topic. The speaking time will be 2 minutes. And the first will Pavel Fischer from the Czech Republic. Oh, not really. Sorry.
I have new information about speakers.
The first to speak will be Grigory Kalev-Stoyescu from Estonia.
Probably is absent. The next speaker is Aron Emilsson from Sweden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, honorable colleagues, and thank you for the possibility to be able to discuss cyber warfare and the Baltic Sea. And thank you also for mentioning Swedish NATO membership accession. And thank you all for a solid and strong support during the accession process, where we noticed some turbulence, as you all know. Of course, we are contributors with world-leading assets as submarines, fighter jets, air surveillance, which all are capabilities crucial for the deterrence and the joint defense of the Baltic Sea, free navigation and protection of critical infrastructure. Although we are very concerned with the situation in the Baltic Sea, we need to take, we believe, a tougher stance in the shadow fleet issue, put more pressure on third-party countries in this regard, diplomatic pressure, sanctions in a higher degree, to be able to condition aid and investments also for third countries, not to provide Russia with this economy. The Nordic Baltic countries and Poland are together forming a strong flank within the NATO framework for deterrence and defense in the Baltic Sea, and a special thanks for our hosts in this regard as well. Let us all, though, not forget how the shadow fleet and all of this oil trade provide the Russian war economy and their ability to be able to continue the warfare, the illegal warfare on Ukraine. And this is also why this is a common and joint mission to end these kind of economic possibilities for Russia. And let's also not forget the for long-term interest and from term-to-term presence of China in both the High North but also in the Baltic Sea. So although this is a very crucial time and geographical area for our special countries, this is a joint mission to address for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker is Martin Stakis from European Parliament.
Yes, from Riga, Latvia. And thank you, Chair, and thank you for organizing this conference once again. So the Baltic states, together with the NATO, have identified the 3 most likely scenarios. And it's clear that the most likely one will be realized. Its Suwalki corridor will be taken. This autumn you will see Zapad 2025 exercises, which will specially rehearse this scenario. We have fairly precise understanding of how the Russian army forces will move, which mechanized units will be used, and how their supply lines will be maintained. Russia will not repeat the mistake it made in Ukraine by overstretching its supply lines. That's why we must pay particular attention to Belarus. There is no doubt that Russia will attempt to fully integrate Belarus in the near future, which would mean establishing the state ground there to threaten the Baltics and Poland. Yesterday, I had a meeting with the Belarusian oppositioners living here in Warsaw. Last week, Lukashenko returned from Moscow in very grimy mood. It's highly likely that some sudden developments are to be expected in the near future. And these days, we speak a lot about Ukraine, and rightly so, but just as much of our attention should be focused on Belarus. which poses direct threat not only to Baltic and Poland, but equally also to Ukraine. And greetings to all Belarusians who fight for a freedom. Today is their Freedom Day. Żyje Belarus.
Thank you so much. The next speaker is Richard Scholz from European Parliament. Have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Just setting the scene in the Baltic Sea. So the Russian drones and missiles are falling from the skies fully armed on our soil. There's a Shahed drone falling in Latvia. There's in Poland missiles falling from the sky. The critical infrastructure in the Baltic Sea is being intentionally damaged, sabotaged. In a span of 15 months, 12 cables have been damaged. That is not coincidence. That is not something that just happened out of blue. The Shadow Fleet is freely moving across the Baltic Sea. This is something that nobody actually mentioned, and I'm surprised. This year, there's Zapad exercises Russia is conducting again together with Belarus. In autumn this year, just to remind you how everything started in 2022, 24th of February, everything started with Zapad exercises in 2021. All eyes should be on those exercises. Trade with Russia, 2023, the amount, the exports, Europe is exporting to Russia amounts to 40 billion. So, of course, the question is, and my recommendation, what to be done in this regard. When it comes to air defense, we should drop this policy of air policing. It should be air defense. It's a totally different concept and it has to be implied. When it comes to exports to Russia, I did call, and I call for the bordering countries to shut down the border physically. Nothing moves across. Nothing moves across. Third point, on the Shadow Fleet. I very commend Finland being the first country actually seizing those tankers. This is the way forward. This is how you fight the Shadow Fleet. And last but not least, when it comes to GPS jamming, what did happen with deterrence through denial? I just heard from the podium saying we need to make things for Russia harder to damage our cables. What kind of mindset is that? We have to make it harder. We should not allow in the first place for Russia to conduct such activities. So I think there is way more that we can do. And last but not least, I do call for a snap NATO military exercise in the Baltic Sea in a time when the Zapad is taking place. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. And next speaker is Lina Wickman from Sweden.
Thank you, Chair and dear colleagues. The Baltic Sea has become a front line. Russia's hybrid attacks, sabotage, GPS jamming, airspace violations, environmental threats, and it challenges our security. And at the heart of Russia's sanctions evasion lies the so-called Shadow Fleet, channeling billions into Putin's war machine. And we must do much more to dismantle this network and cut off this lifeline to the Kremlin. These ships aren't just breaking sanctions, they are floating environmental hazards, and it's a disaster waiting to happen. And the vessels can also map underwater cables, monitor ports, place sensors, and an oil spill would devastate our waters, all while Russia gets away with little to no consequences. And we must stop being reactive and become even more strategic. And crucially, we need a deeper legal analysis on how to tighten enforcement in international waters, to explore how to ban at-sea refueling and ship-to-ship oil transfers while upholding the law of the sea. If we fail to defend maritime security within the legal frameworks that we cherish, others will exploit them against us, and it would be interesting to hear our keynote speakers to comment on this part. Important actions have begun, like NATO's Baltic Sentry and EU sanctions on the Shadow Fleet, but we must go further and we must raise the cost of aggression. The Baltic Sea, it's not just a body of water, it is now a test on European resolve. So let us act with clarity, urgency, and above all, with the strategy that matches the threat. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And next speaker is Michel Gala.
Yes, thank you very much. As has been said, a lot has already been undertaken. Now the Baltic Sea is, apart from those 2 Russian spots, it's our Mare Nostrum, so we should be in a comprehensive way able to control everything that happens on the sea and under the sea. And insofar, if there is still a lack of cooperation, I call on all of our 8 NATO and EU states to do the best in cooperating and coordinating their efforts. We don't need to have double work. I always wondered in the past already, does it require 8 countries to have minesweepers in the Baltic Sea? Perhaps there's 2 or 3 who should do something like that and to save capacities. But when it comes to the current challenges, we have, I think, already sanctioned 150 of these ships and also been in contact with these flag states. There are sometimes little islands in the Caribbean or in the Pacific, and I think they have delisted many of those ships. And we should be very consequent. As soon as they reach our territorial waters, they should be checked each and every day whether they comply with our safety standards, and if not, they should be put to a stop. Now, when it comes to the sanctions, I agree, for instance, that we must coordinate and have all sanctions that we have on Russia must also apply to Belarus. Otherwise, Belarus works as a transit towards Russia. When it's not possible to go ahead with sanctions, because mostly of Hungary currently, we can, and as what we are doing currently is raise tariffs which require only qualified majority. And as we speak, we are having amendment in the relevant committees in the European Parliament as one example only to have higher tariffs on Kali fertilizer from Russia, where we produce 100%, 120% already ourselves, so we don't need such imports, and it would not have any consequences for the prices. So let's be very consequent both on sanctions and on tariffs to get Russia and Belarus under increased pressure. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michel. And next speaker is Margareta Cederfelt from Sweden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, fellow colleagues. I do appreciate this session very much, as it is about the Nordic part of Europe. I believe strongly that we need both European Union, we need our security in common, we need NATO. This is crucial. We know all what Russia are capable to do. We see it in Ukraine, but we can also see it in other parts of the world. And this includes the Baltic Sea, but also the Arctic region. We should not forget any of the water, neither if it's Baltic Sea or if it's the high sea. We know as well that Russia is a power country. They don't understand when it's a no, it's a no. They use power all the time. And we have to stand up for our values, to be strong and not accept any interference from Russia. I see this as crucial, otherwise it will continue and continue. Not only with the threat in Baltic Sea, but also what Russia do in Ukraine. But I find today's debates very refreshing. It shows a unity among us as members from European Union. And I think this is the most important thing, that we stand united and continue to do so, even when it's a very difficult time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. And next speaker is Jarmo Lindberg from Finland.
Thank you, Chair. You know, the hybrid actions have been, when we look years back, it's like academic, but nowadays it's more concrete, and we've listed them already here. It's the destruction of critical infrastructure, dragging anchors, cutting gas pipelines and cables, and half a dozen incidents within a year. So nobody in Finland thinks that they are all mistakes anymore. Instrumentalized migration, Russia pushed a year ago 1,300 immigrants across the border to Finland, and because of that, the whole border has been closed now for more than a year. And we passed in the Parliament a new border control law, which is valid for 1 year, so we need to redo it again. GPS timing has been mentioned several times. Because of that, Finavia, that operates the airports in Finland, is reinstalling old beacons, radio beacons, because the GPS 3D approaches don't work anymore. Tractors in southeastern Finland can't use the autopilot because it doesn't steer a straight line because of the GPS jamming. DDoS attacks against our largest banks, so people are thinking that is this a Russian hybrid campaign? And the challenge is attribution, as we know. And also for us politicians, it's important to know that citizens are beginning to ask that what are we going to do about it? So we need a better situational awareness, proactive actions, and counter-hybrid capability. I'm the chair of the steering group for EU Hybrid Center of Excellence. All EU nations and all NATO nations are members. We have 36 nations. It's a unique organization. And we are studying not only the Russia and the Baltic area, Western Balkans, Ukraine, Mediterranean, Africa. We're working for you. So I'm happy to be here with this community, and we do need to address all these hybrid issues now. We can't wait anymore. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And next speaker is Audronius Ažubalis from Latvia.
Sorry, from Lithuania.
Lithuania.
Yes, Mr. Grzyb. Sorry. Dear colleagues, first of all, when we are complaining about Russia and about their hybrid activities, about malign activities, we should ask ourselves, are we ready to confront Russia? If yes, we should act immediately. Because under the international maritime law, under the EU law, we have a right to restrict to Russian fleet or other country fleet to go into the Baltic Sea if we have a real suspicion that it could undermine our environmental issue, our environment of the Baltic Sea, or other important and I would say reasons. That's why, first of all, we should ask ourselves, because we could complain a lot of time. We could say, Russia doing this and this. Russia is jamming GPS signals. Yes, it's jamming. Are we going to take a sanctions on that? I haven't heard this. But we have a right to do this. We have a right to take a sanctions on the Russian fleet, on Russian center for GPS. We have such kind of center. Why we are not sanctioning the center? That's what, dear colleagues, we should first of all decide that Russia adores and Russia respects just force. If we are realizing that we have this force, let's do it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And next speaker is Hulusi Akar from Turkey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, the distinguished colleagues. Turkey contributes to NATO interoperability and the situational awareness in the Baltic region through its advanced defense industry products, AI-supported systems, including drone technology and intelligence sharing capabilities. Turkey contributes to the NATO Energy Security Center of Excellence, the NATO Cooperative Cyber Defense Center of Excellence, the NATO Force Integration Unit, and the NATO's enhanced forward presence in Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Romania, and all our, the other allied countries. Our naval and the air capabilities have supported operations in the Baltic Sea as well. We will contribute to the Baltic air policing in August-November 2026 from Amera Air Base in Estonia. And Turkey will continue to contribute to the resilience of the alliance in the region. Dear colleagues, while dealing with our agenda items, please consider also crises in other regions, including Gaza, for the global safety and security. Lastly, Mr. Chair, I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to the Parliament of Poland for such a well-organized conference and the kind hospitality. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And next speaker is Baroness Joyce Annelai of St. John's from United Kingdom.
Thank you, Chair. Colleagues, Russian activities in the Baltic Sea region clearly threaten the stability and security not only of the adjacent states, but of all of us. Russia's interference with subsea cables and gas pipelines threaten the viability of transfer of important data, financial data, as well as energy. It includes, of course, the financial data that should, I would hope, be of interest to our US allies as well as to all of us. It is also, of course, a matter that we face a second challenge, one to which our colleague from Sweden has already referred, and that is the matter of shadow fleets. And we've just heard about perhaps potential legal action we can take. To counter both the immediate threats that shadow fleets affect us, we should also recall that they can destroy some of the ecosystem of the Baltic, and in addition to the wider geopolitical consequences of the operations which affect all of us. Currently, the efforts to introduce a uniform approach to the financial, insurance and logistical oversight of the facilities supporting these shadow fleets seem to be hindered by the glacial pace of reforms implemented by the International Maritime Organization. Colleagues, we can turbocharge our efforts to make sure that the IMO is more effective and speedy in its resolve, but also that we deliver on our promises. Again, I also thank, like others, Poland for all their hospitality. It has been marvelous.
Thank you very much. And last speaker is Fuat Oktay from Turkey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The security situation in the Baltic Sea region has become more fragile in recent years. The deteriorating security environment in Europe and the globe has raised alarm regarding the Baltic Sea. NATO allies such as Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, as well as Poland, are exposed to those developments the most. Turkey's commitment to the security of its allies in the Baltics region is indisputable. However, I would like to go beyond military dimension. Apart from its military support, Turkey remains an advocate for diplomacy, dialogue, and de-escalation vis-à-vis any emerging threat, aiming to address challenges collaboratively and ensure the stability and security in the region. Given its unique geopolitical position, Turkey's huge experience in managing complex security dynamics allows us to bring a valuable perspective to the table. We are ready to increase our cooperation with Baltic states in all these aspects. Mr. Chair, in closing, I would also like to express my sincere gratitude to the Parliament of Poland for successfully organizing this conference meeting and for the kind hospitality. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I have information that we have Andro Krstilovic Opara from Croatia.
Thank you, Andrej. Correct pronunciation. Thank you. Želim vam čestitati na izvrsnoj organizaciji. Možda se pitate zbog čega se predstavnik jedne male zemlje sa
Why is a delegate from a small Mediterranean country is addressing this issue? I am proud to say that there is the 14th rotation of Croatian troops in Szczecin. In this defense shield that we as the community of countries have placed ourselves at the disposal to defend from the threats that come from the east. We wish to highlight this because our officers and troops have enormous excellent experience, unfortunately from the war where we had to defend our independence as Ukraine is doing today. We had to be victorious to be able to sit with you today in this hall. Ukraine needs to be victorious. There is no territorial trades. As my colleague just mentioned a few minutes ago, Ukraine must be victorious in order to show Russia that no aggressive behavior of some small Putins will be tolerated in the rest of the world, because that would undermine the principles of democracy, of justice, and, if you wish, the Helsinki Declaration from 1975. 50 years later, Helsinki has been completely annihilated, annulled by the Russian behavior. We must make sure to read again the Helsinki Convention because of its value during the Cold War time, and it is very relevant today. A common security and defense policy is something that connects us. I'm sorry that our colleagues from Serbia are not here. They do not belong to the common security defense policy. They did not impose sanctions on Russia. But we still have them here today because we hope that they will find a way to democratize. And in the end, to conclude, a small Croatia participates in the defense activities in the Baltic, but because of Europe and the decisions of Europe cannot participate, is not allowed to participate in peacemaking operations in Bosnia and Herzegovina. This is a hypocrisy that we still have today. Are we Democrats or what are we? There are many things that we need to fix, to repair, to jointly contribute to promoting peace and protecting the life that we live today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Proszę Państwa, to był ostatni głos w tej debacie.
Thank you very much. That was the last speaker in this debate.
Pana admirała
I would like to give the floor to Admiral
ze swojej strony podsumować
Jaworski to recap the debate, perhaps respond to some of the opinions or question marks that may have emerged in the debate. Admiral, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
I would like to say that it was really fruitful discussion, and I'm really happy that I had this opportunity to attend this meeting and to present, as I mentioned, the current situation in the Baltic Sea region. What I think is very important is cooperation between our countries. And I mean not only cooperation regarding from military side, but also economic. So both NATO, European Union, and just mutual cooperation is very important to provide safety and security for our countries. And what is the key to success? I think that deterrence, just to prevent Russia from any hostile action. And if deterrence failed, of course, we are ready to defend our countries. And there was a Zapad exercise mentioned. I would like to say that we are closely monitoring all activities connected with Zapad exercise in all domains. So we are ready to act if there is a need for that. Thank you very much. If you have any question, please don't hesitate to ask.
Okay.
Thank you.
Without questions. Dziękuję bardzo, panie admirale. I teraz chciałbym zaprosić, aby głos zabrał pan Jarosław Ćwiek-Karpowicz,
Mr. Jarosław Ćwiek-Karpowicz, Director of the Polish Institute of International Affairs.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. First of all, I would like to Thank you for your very inspiring, interesting contributions and interventions. I'm personally very much impressed by what you said about how we should react and how we should be strong and together. And this is what I heard, as I remember, from one of the member of the Parliament. I think that it's important to underline that we, of course, should react and be strong together and unified. And one of the elements of deterrence is to show our ability to defend ourselves, to react. But also, the other part of deterrence is to show our ability to be more proactive and to act against Russian interests, not just to wait what Russians are doing. And this is what I tried to underline during my first speech, how much Baltic Sea is important for Russian economic interests. That the big reservoir of Russian crude oil is located in Western Siberia, and Russia has no other option as to export crude oil through the Baltic Sea and eventually Black Sea. There is no link between Western Siberia and Eastern Siberia and the Pacific Ocean port, which would allow Russia to export crude oil on the Asian markets. So that's why Baltic Sea and the Russian activity on Baltic Sea is completely different in other areas where Russia has more, let's say, free hands on the high north or Mediterranean Sea, whatsoever. Baltic Sea is our advantage. It's locked by, let's say, NATO countries. And I can easily imagine lots of inspections on the Danish Straits, which will carefully examine every single Russian tanker going from the Russian ports in Primorsk and Usluga to the other destinations. So we can be more active and show Russia that we have tools and we are ready to use them, which extremely will hurt Russian economic energy interests. Because as was mentioned before, the vast majority of Russian export is crude oil, and all revenues which would allow Russia to conduct a war in Ukraine is coming from crude oil export, and the main corridor which Russia is not able to replace is the Baltic Sea corridor. So this is my message for us, to be ready to defend our position, our interest in Baltic Sea, to monitor what Russia is doing, but also to be ready for more proactive measures. Thank you very much.
Chciałem bardzo serdecznie podziękować naszym keynote speakerom.
May I thank our keynote speakers so much for their interventions, both in the initial part of the debate and after the debate.
Uczestników konferencji. Mam nadzieję, że była to dla Państwa
I'm hoping
ciekawa
that
część konferencji, mimo że ostatnia. Zdaję sobie z tego sprawę, że
challenging, intellectually challenging, in the positive sense of the word, session 4, last session. Some of our colleagues have already left because of the travel arrangements, and thank you very much for being with us. And thank you all, those who are still present, for sharing your opinions. It was my personal idea to include this session in the conference. I thought it most appropriate that we should discuss security of the Baltic region, and I thought that it was only natural that the NATO has enlarged to include Sweden and Finland in response to Russia's aggression, and we commend these countries for taking the initiative. Of course, the Baltic Sea can play a vital role.
cywilizacyjne wyzwania związane z
But
rolą, jaką odgrywa Morze Bałtyckie
we need to
w naszym
take a
regionie.
different perspective.
Koncentrujemy
We
się
have to
różne
change
elementy
our
związane
vision.
z tym
And
hasłem,
mind you, the
które
Baltic Sea is
przyświeca polskiej prezydencji.
is
Bezpieczeństwo
a meeting
Europy.
point of
Wydaje mi się,
cultures.
że tutaj
Fine,
różne
but it is
aspekty tego
also
bezpieczeństwa zostały w tej debacie poruszone,
a
związane
key
są z
area
regionem
that will
Morza
define
Bałtyckiego.
our
Chciałem bardzo
security.
serdecznie Państwu
Ladies and gentlemen,
podziękować
thank you
za
so much
udział w tej części czwartej,
for taking
części,
part
przepraszam,
in
piątej.
session 4.
Czwartej plus urgent debate.
Session 4 or 5, session 4 plus urgent debate.
Jestem przekonany, że pewnie będziemy wracali akurat do tego tematu jeszcze wielokrotnie.
I'm sure we will revisit
Natomiast,
this topic a number of times in the
poza
future.
tematem chciałbym zwrócić uwagę, że dzisiaj jest bardzo ważny dzień dla
Also, may I
wszystkich, którym leży na
draw
sercu
your
niepodległość
attention
wolnej
that we have a
Białorusi.
special
Dzisiaj jest Belarusian
day.
Freedom Day.
It's Belarusian
To jest
Freedom Day
rocznica,
today.
w
It's
której
the
diaspora
anniversary
białoruska obchodzi w całym
that
świecie
is celebrated by the Belarus
ten dzień
diaspora
deklaracji
all over the
niepodległości z
world, the
1918
Declaration
roku dla wolnej Białorusi.
of freedom from
Tego dnia
the
prezydenci
19th
Stanów
century.
Zjednoczonych
The
zawsze
presidents of the
zapraszają
United
diasporę
States
białoruską. I składam już z tej okazji tego dnia
invite
życzenia.
Belarusian
Wydaje mi się,
diaspora
że
and
na koniec tej części debaty dotyczącej
bestow the best
bezpieczeństwa
wishes
regionu Morza Bałtyckiego
and
należy to przesłanie również z tej sali
on the national
Serdecznie dziękuję i zapraszam po krótkiej technicznej
holiday.
przerwie do
Right, thank you very
podsumowania
much.
naszych
After a
dwudniowych,
short
właściwie
technical break,
trzydniowych
we're going to
spotkań
hear
panią
from
Agnieszkę Pomaską,
Agnieszka
przewodniczącą
Pomaska,
Komisji do
Chair
Spraw
of the
Unii
European
Europejskiej
Union
oraz pana
Affairs
marszałka
Committee
profesora
of the Sejm of the Republic
Grodzkiego,
of Poland and Tomasz Grodzki, Chair of the
którzy
European
zakończą
Union
tę
Affairs
konferencję.
Committee of the
Dziękuję
Senate
państwu, żegnam się z
of
państwem.
Poland, who will
Andrzej
wrap
Grzyb,
up the
przewodniczący
conference,
Komisji Obrony
and
Polskiego Sejmu. Dziękuję
I
bardzo.
would like to thank you very much for your attention, Andrzej Grzyb, the Defence Select Committee of the Polish Sejm.
Shall we continue, because the lunch is waiting, so please take your seats or move with your informal talks to the couloirs. Let me switch into Polish. Okay, I will start. Za nami wystąpienia wielu gości, mnóstwo interesujących spostrzeżeń, uwagi i debata na niezwykle aktualne tematy w zakresie spraw zagranicznych, obronności i bezpieczeństwa. Podczas pierwszej sesji poświęconej zagrożeniom hybrydowym zwracaliśmy uwagę, jak wrogie Europie Autorytarne państwa starają się zdestabilizować nasz mały kontynent poprzez różne ingerencje od cyfrowych kampanii dezinformacyjnych ukierunkowanych na osłabienie demokracji i naszych wspólnych europejskich wartości, do ataków na infrastrukturę krytyczną, jak również ingerencje w proces wyborczy zarówno w państwach Unii Europejskiej, jak i w bliskim sąsiedztwie. W czasie drugiej sesji poświęconej budowie nowej architektury bezpieczeństwa Unii Europejskiej omówiliśmy wyzwania stojące przed Europą i to, jaka powinna być nasza reakcja na te wyzwania. W obecnej sytuacji geopolitycznej oczywiste jest, że Europa musi wziąć kwestię swojej obronności we własne ręce i szybko zbudować swoje zdolności obronne. Umiesz liczyć na siebie.
its capability quickly. If you can count on yourself, it's an old saying, is still vitally topical today, even though the European Union is not a military organization. The need of the moment is such that we have to ramp up our defenses and rearm Europe, and the white paper of the European Commission are instruments that are going in exactly this direction. We should act jointly as we did during the financial crisis or the coronavirus pandemic. We discussed transatlantic relations, and it must be clearly emphasized that there is no alternative to transatlantic bond. And we have to cherish it, even though we keep hearing somewhat embarrassing comments from American officials like the ones yesterday or today. We definitely appreciate from Europe American military presence in Europe, and we want it to last. And we understand that political and budgetary priorities and others may vary and may evolve in the United States and may not include Europe as one of the top priorities as it was in the past. So we have to adapt and we have to take the security in our own hands. However, it must be emphasized and noted that Europe is an unwavering supporter of the international community based on values, international law, and guarantees of border integrity. And during session number 3, as we discussed the fact that Russia's motivation is to spread propaganda that would divide Europe and would set ourselves on each other. We have to prevent this, and let's quote Mr. Tusk's, Prime Minister Tusk's words, quoted by Speaker Hołownia. How come 500 Europeans are begging 300 Americans to deal with 140 million Russians who can't tackle a 60 million nation of Ukraine for 3 years? We often fail to appreciate the enormous economic potential of Europe. Europe is a giant, but it has to awaken itself. And during the last recently completed session, we raised the issue of the vital issue of Baltic Sea regional security, which has become an internal lake of the NATO, apart from, with the exception of the Kaliningrad, but it has also become a place where sabotage is happening, where underwater infrastructure is being attacked, where GPS signal is jammed and spoofed, and other acts such as monitoring the port activity of the Baltic states. It all shows, there are all indications that it is Russia's doing. We understand that this is just testing, an act of testing of our capabilities. This is why we have
dlatego wymagają zdecydowanej odpowiedzi z naszej
designed
strony
the
zarówno w
Baltic
ramach Sojuszu
Century
Północnoatlantyckiego, jak i
initiative,
Unii Europejskiej.
which calls for the close
Bardzo dziękujemy za tak
collaboration
liczną państwa
between the EU
obecność
and the NATO.
w
Thank you
Warszawie.
very much for such
Chciałbym poinformować, że współprzewodniczący konferencji z
for
odpowiednich
such
komisji
a significant
Sejmu,
presence
Senatu i Parlamentu Europejskiego
of your
uzgodnili
parliaments in
wspólne
Warsaw.
oświadczenie. Zgodnie z regulaminem naszej konferencji ostateczną wersję dokumentu w języku angielskim i francuskim przekażemy do wiadomości wszystkich delegacji
statement
przewodniczących parlamentów
that will
narodowych
be
i Parlamentu Europejskiego,
delivered to
przewodniczących Rady
all
Europejskiej i
members
Komisji oraz wysokiego
of
przedstawiciela do spraw
Parliament
zagranicznych i polityki bezpieczeństwa.
and all
Wspólne
the officials,
oświadczenie
including
zostanie
the
też
High
zamieszczone na stronie
Representative
iPad.
for Foreign Affairs,
Proszę
and
państwa, w
that will be
1938
in
roku w
English
Monachium,
and
jak
French.
powiedział
In
Winston
1938 in Munich, as
wybraliście
Winston
hańbę,
Churchill
aby
said,
uniknąć wojny.
you
A i tak
elected
będziecie
disgrace to
mieli
avoid war, but you'll have
Miał
war
rację.
anyway. He was right.
Musimy wyciągać wnioski z
We
historii
have to
i nie
learn from
powtarzać
history
błędów
and
poprzedników.
never repeat the
Tak jak
mistakes
powiedział
committed by
tu, w
predecessors.
Warszawie, prezydent Finlandii Niinisto.
President Niinisto said here in
untouchable.
Warsaw.
So civis pacem parabellum. If you want peace, prepare for a war. Thank you very much. Teraz oddam głos współprzewodniczącej
Now let me give the floor to my co-chair, Mrs. Agnieszka Pomaska, for her final
Bardzo
comments.
dziękuję, panie przewodniczący, ale przede wszystkim
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. But first and foremost, may I thank all the participants of this conference that looks at defense, security and foreign policy. Thank you for being here and thank you for being active.
Nie każdego dnia, nawet w trakcie posiedzenia Sejmu na tej sali mamy taką frekwencję.
It doesn't happen all the time that we have such full attendance in this room, even during the parliamentary sessions in full swing. Thank you for this. Security is a topic that we have addressed and threats coming from the various parts. Also, I am wholeheartedly confident that every threat, every crisis gives an opportunity for us to gain strength as we solve the situation, to get an upper hand. And in the debate, we have seen so much evidence that this is actually true. We have come closer to each other, to one another, even though some of our perspectives may differ depending on where we come from in Europe. They may be different, but no doubt 2 days after these debates, our perspectives have come closer together because the aim is shared and we show full resolve to solve these problems. And thank you very much for this resolve and the readiness to look for specific solutions.
I also want to say that there is no better place to live than Europe. This is the best place to live in the world, I believe. It's very simple. And I have no doubt whatsoever that taking into account the different security dimensions, Europe remains the safest place to live in the world.
Wyjdziemy stąd na pewno wzmocnieni z takim przekonaniem, że to o to bezpieczeństwo będziemy dbać, walczyć tak, żebyśmy nie tylko my, ale przyszłe pokolenia miały gwarancję i poczucie tego bezpieczeństwa. Chciałam bardzo serdecznie też podziękować wszystkim współprowadzącym, wszystkim speakerom w trakcie naszej konferencji, ale w sposób szczególny chciałam podziękować pracownikom Kancelarii Sejmu, Kancelarii Senatu, którzy wiem, włożyli wiele serca, ale też godzin pracy, nie tylko w tygodniu pracy, w weekendy, także wielkie brawa dla tych wszystkich, którzy Państwa ugościli. Bardzo za to dziękuję.
Would be in order for everybody who worked to make this happen.
Dziękuję tłumaczom. To też bardzo ważna rola i za tą taką gotowość do
our thanks
ciężkiej pracy, wiemy, że zwłaszcza nasza spontaniczność bardzo często jest dużym wyzwaniem dla tłumaczy, więc za to też bardzo serdecznie dziękuję. Szanowni Państwo, kończąc, bardzo teraz proszę o opuszczenie krótkiej prezentacji prezydencji duńskiej, a następnie o zabranie głosu przedstawiciela delegacji duńskiej i powiedzenie kilku słów na temat naszego kolejnego spotkania.
Well, thank you so much. And let me, on behalf of the Danish delegation, send a huge thank you to our Polish friends for a very, very excellent conference. We really, really appreciate your hospitality. And we're really, really seen Warsaw by its finest example, and also some extremely good talks in this chamber on very, very important issues. And as you all know, Denmark is going to take over the presidency of the European Union in July. And therefore, we will, from the Danish Parliament side, like to thank you on behalf of the Danish delegation, say we really want to welcome you to Copenhagen in August. I know there have been some talks about August, because in some countries there are summer holiday in August. And therefore, we really want to say it's the end of August. It's the 26th to 28th of August. But as you saw in the video, Copenhagen is always best in summertime. And if you really, really want to experience Copenhagen at its finest, and also want to experience Tivoli Gardens at its finest, you have to come in August. And therefore, we really try to find a balance between you still can have your summer holiday in Southern Europe, and then come refreshed and ready to work in Copenhagen the 26th of August. So with that, we really, really want to welcome you, and we really want to be ready to very, very good talks. So welcome to Copenhagen in August. Thank you so much.
Dziękuję bardzo, Michael, za to gorące zaproszenie do Kopenhagi i okolic, bo konferencja będzie też w Billund. A wszystkim Państwu dziękuję za głosy i uwagi, jak również przewodniczącym Komisji Sejmu, Senatu oraz Parlamentu Europejskiego współprowadzącym ze mną to spotkanie za sprawne przeprowadzenie tej ważnej konferencji. Mam zaszczyt zamknąć 26. konferencję międzyparlamentarną do spraw wspólnej polityki zagranicznej i bezpieczeństwa oraz wspólnej polityki bezpieczeństwa i obrony. Do zobaczenia w Danii, do zobaczenia w Kopenhadze.